Well, here we are. It's Sunday. It's 2 o'clock. It's time for the Sunday show. I'm at Dillahunty. Joining me, Paulogia. How are you, sir?
I am well. I'm hoping you're the same.
I'm actually not well. Not only does my video freeze and lag up like crazy, but yeah, actually, just a minute ago, got physically ill.
Oh no!
So, welcome to the Sunday show, which also I haven't shared a link or told anybody about or anything else because everything that can go wrong has been going wrong on my machine.
When I was an evangelical and there were technical problems with the sound or the video or whatever, we would always say that was demons attacking us. And the demons would only attack the show or attack the church service if they really knew that something special was supposed to happen during that church service. That's how we knew God was moving. Technical problems.
Yeah, I still haven't even sent out links and information for today's show, and I'm going to need you to take off and vamp and preface for like 2 or 3 minutes while I fix another thing that's broken.
Sure, no problem at all. Well, welcome again to another Sunday show. Yes, Matt will be back in a moment. I don't actually have a list of our announcements, otherwise I could jump on that, but let me just talk to you a minute about Twitter, and that, because that's come up today a few times. I primarily use YouTube as my main platform of discourse, although I sometimes use blogs when I need to write, and I sometimes use other social media like Facebook. But if it's on YouTube, that's my serious thoughts. Now, I personally like to use some of the other social media like Instagram and Twitter specifically for fun and for engaging with theists, because there's a lot more theists on there. In fact, mostly my Twitter these days has been just Elon Musk telling me who to vote for. And people like that, as that's really been inundating. They seem to not know that as a Canadian, I cannot vote in the American election. That doesn't seem important to them, which is fine. But I also enjoy posting just things on Twitter just for fun to see how things go. Anyway, yesterday I posted a few things that theists are reacting to, and I know that I put up a syllogism, which I knew wasn't a real syllogism. It was just more of some points to have fun. Anyway, if you are one of the people who have been on there telling me that, hey, this isn't a real syllogism, let's call in. Give me a call. Give us a call. Matt and I will go over what I intended, what I meant, whether or not Twitter is appropriately a place to be silly, or we must always be serious there. Anyway, that's a bit of a introduction, a invitation, as it were, to call on in. What we want to do here, we want people to call in, tell us what they believe and why Matt and I should believe it. But this is not the only show that happens on the line. We actually have a bunch of great shows coming up. Tomorrow, we have Skeptalk with John Gleason, and I believe it will be, that's a given, but it may not be. If you go to the thumbnail now, it's my face, but I will not be here. So we'll see who that's going to be. We have Chewed Gum on Tuesday with Eve Was Framed and Arden Hart. We have a special edition of The Hang Up The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty. I don't know who Matt's guest is going to be. I'm guessing that with only a few days left in America, the current season of America is wrapping up, as we all know, in its last month of the show. So Matt, I'm sure we'll have stuff to talk about with that. We have to Transatlantic Call-In Show on Thursday with Arden and Jody, looks like.
Josie. Like Josie and the
pardon
Pussycats.
me. My screen is my little fingers are too small there. And then I lost it on Thursday. We have our sort of new / old show because I wanna, which used to be just when Jimmy would ever want to, but now it's on the schedule. So that doesn't make sense, Jimmy. But Jimmy will be hosting that with perhaps by himself, perhaps with others. Another Cause I Wanna on Saturday with Jimmy and Josie. And then a week from now, this show will be hosted, the Sunday show, by Forrest Valkai and Erika Gibbon. And anyway, that is a bit of a wrap up. We have a lot of shows on the line. A lot of times we talk about politics. Not a lot of times. Of late, we've been talking about politics on some of the shows. A lot of times we are talking about what to believe and why, social issues, all that kind of great stuff. So stay tuned on the line for all that kind of fun.
See, I'm back. It's like I didn't even go away. I'm still just sitting here.
Go away. Now you don't have to do announcements. That's the good news.
That's cool. My apologies. So yeah, my computer's been acting up. Hopefully it's not in the process of dying, but we'll do some cleanup on it. It's a weird thing that really only happens with vMix and with OBS's virtual camera. Other than that, everything's fine. Like I can stream on Twitch and Streamlabs OBS, no problems, no hiccups, no delays. And as soon as we start working with vMix and OBS, it's like, hang on, this virtual camera, it doesn't load at all in Firefox. It loads sometimes in Edge or Chrome, since that's Chromium based anyway. But all right, we have callers queuing up. We have one call in the queue at the moment, and I'm just going to remind people that the theist callers are always going to get priority. And as Paul was pointing out, we want you to call in and explain what you believe and why. And in particular, the why is important because that's how we determine, hey, should we believe you? Should we agree with you? So we're going to start off today with John's calling from California, and evidently he has proof of the one true God, and I told him in chat to call in. So I don't remember when I told you, but welcome, John. What's up?
Yeah, no, it was a couple of weeks ago with when I was talking to Eric and John Gleason. No, I just noticed in the chat that you said John should call me on Wednesday. That was a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't get back until today. But I don't know if you even remember why you said I should call you or so.
No, but if I said you should call me on Wednesday, calling me on Sunday is kind of weird. But go ahead.
Well, I wasn't available on Wednesday, so not so weird.
The point, John, is that Wednesday show and Sunday show are very, very different topics. And so there are some things where I want, anything related to religion, better off on Sunday. Anything related to politics, for me, probably better off on Wednesday. But you're saying you can prove the one true God, so let's do it. Let's get proof of the one true God.
So that's religious, then, right? Appropriate for Sunday, then, I guess.
Perfect. Yep.
Okay, but yeah. Well, the problem is, I mean, with Eric and John Gleason, we did it the conversational way, and since I went back and checked the timestamps, it was like 26 minutes. And within like about 1 or 2 minutes, I realized that it was all a pointless waste of time. It was going to go nowhere. But I just stuck it out to the bitter end to see how much airtime they would waste. Basically, just I don't know.
Is that what you're doing right now, John? Is that what you're doing right now? Instead of actually presenting proof of God, you're just going to talk about a previous call and see how much airtime we'll waste with you rambling on about a previous call? Why don't you go ahead, John? Why don't you go ahead and start presenting your proof for the one true God?
Okay.
Hang on.
Yes.
Hang on. Let me mute you for a second. I'm not quite sure what's going on, John. I'm definitely trying to maintain, but do you know what's really annoying? Someone calling in to say that they've got proof of the one true God, and then they just complain about a previous call and how much time was wasted. And then when I tell them, let's just get to it and prove the one true God, they do this heavy sigh. Nobody's forcing you to call in and defend your beliefs. So this is an opportunity for you to speak to an audience, to make a case for whatever the one true God you think it is, and why we should believe it as well. So maybe take a breath, not sigh as much, and let's get to proving a God. Okay?
The one true God has a name. Oh, by the way, I wrote all this in my own words. It's not something I took from someplace else. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I will prove the existence of the one true God, the real God that all of us can see and feel. And maybe I should ask first, were you talking about you wanted people to present evidence?
Okay, I'm going to mute you again, John, because honestly, at this point, everybody thinks you're just a troll. Like, you're the first caller in, and when we're looking for evidence to demonstrate the truth of a proposition about a God, I like the fact that you said, okay, I'm going to prove the one true God, and it has a name, but you didn't give the name. Then you went on to, I could prove its existence. And then you want to start asking questions. Here's your last chance, John. I'm going to unmute you. Please provide your evidence for the one true God now.
Okay. I will prove the existence of the one true God.
John, I don't need you to tell me that you will prove the existence of the one true God. You need to do it, and you need to do it right now. No more preamble, no more stalling, or I will just ban you, because it's becoming obvious that you're the one that wants to waste time. So present your case for God.
Okay. The one true God has a name. It's called nature. Is this okay? Am I going okay now, or is this okay? The one true God
No,
has
John,
a name.
it's not okay, actually. See, the thing is, when you start actually doing something and you get as far as the name, and then you do the, is this okay? You're no longer engaged in defending your God belief. And now you're engaged in time wasting once again. I swear to nature that if you pull this shit one more time, we will end this call. So you say that there is one true God and its name is nature. Please demonstrate that this God exists.
Okay. The one true God has a name. It's called nature, but nature is not spelled with a small n, a lowercase n. It's spelled with a capital N because the name of the one true God deserves to be capitalized. When I say the word nature, I don't just mean the plants and animals.
John?
Hello? Yes?
I don't need you to tell me about the name of the God or describe nature. I need you to provide the evidence that you have found the one true God. I don't know why this is so difficult, but let's do it.
Okay. You might think nature does not qualify as a god because it's not a supernatural being.
No, John, I didn't ask you whether or not nature qualifies as a god or not. I asked you to demonstrate that you've found the one true God. I swear to nature, if the next words out of your mouth are anything other than my reason for believing that nature is the one true God is, followed by the actual evidence, I will hang up and block your phone number. Here we go. Try it again.
I'm sorry.
Goodbye. Okay. I at least managed to get that phone number down.
That was like an AI was reading a children's book, and you said, every time you're interrupted, I want you to say the word okay, and then just keep reading the children's book from where you left off, as if nothing had happened. He had written a script and wanted to read it on air.
Oh, actually, I have the phone number, and I looked up because the person who just called in is John. I keep a list here of phone numbers from problematic callers just here on my desktop. And that phone number that John just called in is the same phone number as the person who called in as Doofus McDipshit. So John is absolutely just a troll caller. And we will now ban John's phone number so that John, if he wants to call the show, is going to have to find other opportunities to defend his capital N nature as Doofus McDipshit. It's
good start.
It's a really, really shaky start we're at here now. How about we don't have these callers right now, but Jeff's calling from the UK on church-state separation. Jeff's pronouns are he, him. How you doing, Jeff?
Hello, hi, Matt and Paul. Nice to speak to you.
Welcome.
Yeah, I just saw the call last week, and I know the caller didn't really. There is no state religion of the UK, and also there was something about the blasphemy laws as well. You're talking about. Hello, has my phone gone to sleep? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can now.
Oh, did you miss me before?
I think we may have missed some of that. If you had a question.
Oh, just saying. I was, there was calls last week about state and church separation in the UK. I'm saying there is no UK religion, no state religion.
The Church of England, C of E, is the established Christian church in England, and the Crown is the head of the church.
It is England, but it's not the Church of the UK though, which is the sovereign state.
Sure.
And Scotland's got its own religion, which is the Church of Scotland, which is a religion that the King of England is not in charge of.
Yes, there's a difference between England, Scotland, UK, etc. Yes, I probably conflated them. Is there anything substantive?
Yeah, Wales and Northern Ireland.
Yes.
Also,
I don't need to list off every part of the UK. I've already said I potentially conflated them. Is there anything substantive we need to address?
You said about blasphemy laws. Blasphemy was made illegal in England in 2008.
Jeff, I don't understand the point.
I think my phone
what is it that I supposedly said and that was wrong? Let's correct it and move on.
You said that blasphemy laws are on the books in the UK.
Okay. But you abolished blasphemy laws in 2008.
Yeah, and Scotland abolished them this year as well.
Yeah.
And there are still blasphemy laws, and there are still blasphemy laws on the books in several US states.
The blasphemy laws they're still on the books in U.S. states are overridden by the Constitution of the United States.
Okay, well, it's just I know I saw you a few years ago say that blasphemy was still a law in the UK when it wasn't. That was a thing, and that there is church and state separation in the UK.
Okay, thanks.
Well, thanks. That's all. Yeah, thanks. Keep it up. I do appreciate what you're doing.
Okay, cheers. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, at the end of the day, yeah, don't want to be giving out misinformation. On the other hand, have clearly been receiving some misinformation or conflated information. So, how about I just shut up about England and the UK entirely? But I'm pretty sure that there were laws still on the books about speech that causes offense. Some of his hate crime laws more than religious stuff, but it doesn't matter. Whatever the laws are, I'm not even quite sure what the context was for that conversation, because I don't remember discussing blasphemy then. It was probably years before that I talked about, or sometime before that I talked about blasphemy laws. So yeah, if you're in the UK and you were misrepresented, my apologies. Let's ease on down the road. Speaking of which, we've got another UK atheist here. Stuart calling in. Could a God have an objective morality that is part of its makeup that it couldn't change?
Yeah, hi, Matt.
Hi, Stuart.
Oh, yeah, great to talk to you. I remember when I first found you on YouTube, I then listened back to the last 14 years of atheist experience that you did. I've been listening to you for a few years now.
Cool, thanks. So
anyway, yeah, so I was sort of having this argument with myself, really, about asking a question that if the morality comes from God, could that God change its mind? Because if it did, then it would be subjective. And if the other person said, no, it couldn't, it would be part of its structure, part of its makeup that it couldn't change. I wondered if that would be a possibility and what sort of, why a theist would say that. What would be the point of having a God like that? Why would it be better than anything else?
I'm a little confused.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've heard you talk about that a God couldn't have an objective reality a couple of times, but I haven't really got it sort of straight in my own head how if that would be the case and how you would say that. So
one common thing among theologians is to say that God's character, that it's somehow and it doesn't make any sense, but somehow it's a part of God's ontology that he is the grounding for morality. And that's what makes it objective, because it's not a subjective opinion. It's just about who God is. And the thing is, it's still, I mean, if it's God's thoughts, it's subjective. If it's God's character and not thoughts, then maybe it's objective.
Right. So if it was objective, how would that be a benefit? Why do they like to? They seem to try. And
I have no idea. I have no idea why anybody thinks that some objective standard out there is better than some other standard, objective or not.
Right. Yeah. So basically, it's not much of an argument really for them.
Stuart, would you agree that the rules of chess are objective in a way, in that if you're playing chess, at least in a given tournament, say that everyone at the tournament agrees that we're going to be playing by, and Matt will know the name of the proper, but anyway, that everyone in the tournament agrees this is the set of rules we're going to use. Therefore, the set of rules are objective because we all agreed that was the objective rules. That would be objective, right?
Yeah.
But then if, let's say, a few years later, 10 years down the road, the committee that makes the rules decides there's going to be a rule change. And everyone agrees, okay, you're coming into the 2034 tournament, and the rules are going to be slightly different this year, but they're still objective rules, right?
Yeah.
When I was a Christian, so this is kind of where I'm going. When I was a Christian, I reconciled this very easily in that God could change it. God could have temporal changes in the way rules he wanted people to follow, and yet they still be objective. And I think I likened it to the scenario I just described. So I'm not attempting to argue for it. I'm just hope maybe that's another picture you can put in your brain when someone's arguing for you, that's maybe a better analogy, or what they're thinking of, at least potentially. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. So you've got that God can change the rules, but once he's changed them, then that makes it objective. So that's where they're based in their.
At least that's what Christians I encounter and the kind of Christian I was would have said. So I don't know if that's a clarification for yourself in the audience, but.
So there's the lecture that I gave for quite a while about the superiority of secular morality. So people sometimes confuse objective and arbitrary, and they'll focus on whether or not it's objective or subjective. So here's the thing. I can make subjective assessments of an action with respect to a goal. But if I'm actually comparing the consequences to the standard, that's not a subjective assessment, because it's not a matter of opinion as to whether or not something broke the rules. So if, for example, FIDE sets the rules for castling in chess, and you castle, you have not broken the rule. But if they decided to get rid of the castling option and you castle, you have objectively broken the rule. So whether or not the rule is arbitrary or not, like they could just say, hey, we're going to have this tournament. You don't have to play chess that way. There's also chess 960 and there's house rules and, all kinds of things. But if you're in agreement that here's the standard that we're working towards, then now, even if the standard is arbitrary, even if the standard was just an opinion, a subjective opinion of somebody, your actions can be compared objectively to that standard to determine if you are consistent with the rules. And the same thing for morality. So I don't know what people think they're getting, or what benefit they think they're getting by saying, oh, but no, God's an objective standard. They seem to think that having a subjective standard is a bad thing. But if your subjective standards are, hey, we want to do the things that lead towards a better world. And how are we going to define better? We're going to define better as people are healthier, happier, there's less conflict, there's less death, there's, you just list off all the criteria and figure out, what kind of aggregate score you get for this world, and then play out the hypothetical to see the other world and say, let's go for the best world. And it doesn't matter whether your decision to care about, climate change was a subjective personal preference or not. Once it becomes part of the standard of what we're going to evaluate with regard to our future, you can make objective assessments about it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I suppose the other question then is you would ask them is, how do you know? How do you know what God's objective opinion is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that I should think I find that pretty difficult.
I always wonder how people know what it is that God wants, because I did a video not too long ago about whether or not God can communicate clearly, because there seems to be a lot of confusion, not the least of which is that within Christianity, there's like 1,000 denominations that all disagree on various points of doctrine. If God can communicate effectively, then I don't know what the explanation is for all of this disagreement, because all these people are pointing essentially to the same God and saying, this is what I think God wants. Well, this is what I think God wants. Well, I think God wants this. And not only do none of them present any kind of mechanism or method by which we can confirm that they're right, but also God doesn't seem to be doing anything at all to say, no, I'm sorry. All this confusion, the Methodists are the ones that have it right. Or the Pentecostals are the ones that are closest to right, but here, let's tweak it so that you can all actually be right. An all-knowing God that loves you and wants you to know and accurately understand what his positions are is wholly inconsistent with competing revelations.
Yeah. It's also it's the same with Jesus as well. When you were talking about, I mean, if Jesus wanted people to know he existed, why did he make it so difficult or leave so little evidence that he ever existed? It'd be nice if he actually wrote something down and made it pretty clear that he did exist.
That would be nice.
Yeah. That was So that was because that was my question. Really, that was great. Thanks very much. It was because people don't seem to nail down very often about that problem with objectivity with a God. It comes up now and again, but it doesn't seem to get actually pinned down very much.
Even if there was a God who had a subjective opinion about morality that we then used as an objective standard with which to compare actions, you're right that it still hasn't answered, how do we know what God's opinion is? Like, even if you wanted to say, God is the author or the foundation of morality, then the next question is, okay, how do we find out what that means? How do we find out what a God thinks or feels, or what part of a God is consistent with morality? Because at the end of the day, you could claim that you are pointing to an objective standard outside of you that is grounded in God A, and somebody else could say the same thing for God B or God C or God D. And until we have some way to actually compare those proposed gods to find out which one of them we can actually investigate and get information about, then they're all equally irrelevant. I mean, it's like saying, yeah, well, my dad can beat up your dad, except that all the people who are saying it can't ever point to their dad.
Exactly, yeah, and that's their argument against our sort of idea of morality, is that we can change our minds, and one person can say one thing and one person can say another thing, but it's exactly the same problem for them.
Yep, I think that's about it, Stuart. I don't. If you run across anybody who's saying something more substantive about a God and objective morality, let us know.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for your time.
Cheers. So we've got an atheist on the line here that we're going to take as the next caller, who wants to present an argument against God. Now, I fully suspect that Paul and I will likely, we will put on our devil's advocate hats and do what we can to represent the theistic side, because there are no theists that are calling in to actually defend anything. There are prank callers and trolls and whatever else. But it's weird that here we are, Sunday afternoon, about 2:30, and giving theists an opportunity to call in and actually present evidence for their God or their supernatural belief. And they're not currently making use of that system. So I guess, Paul, either you and I are just too good at this and have scared them all off, or maybe there's a big event happening that requires all believers to be elsewhere. Although
maybe.
I have seen them in chat, so it's strange. Here we go. Anthony in Florida is an atheist who wants to present an argument against God. So, which God?
Well, thank you for letting me call in. It's the first time caller, and I wanted to say thank you, Matt and Paul. And I agree with you. I wish you had more atheist more theist callers. But yeah, the first thing is define which God. And I would have to go with the classical definition of the Christian God, which is an omniscient, knows everything that has and will happen. And he's maximally powerful. He can't disobey logic. He can't create a rock so heavy he can't lift it. And I hear a lot of religious people, you can argue with me about this point, that God does not change. He does not change his mind. And also that a lot of these people believe in God, believe that hell is a real place where people that are sinners are sent to be tormented eternally in pain and anguish. So that defines the God.
Okay, that's a lot. I mean, that's not even, there's stuff there that not even all Christians believe.
Okay,
which ones?
Like hell, for example. Billy Graham and others believed in annihilation theory, that basically those who didn't believe just ceased to exist, that there wasn't actually like an eternal torment in a hell. So there might be a little much adding that one in.
That was my big one, but okay, go ahead.
That your big one is that, see, it seems like you're building up to this case that hell is immoral and is in conflict with the nature of the very God that they're advocating for.
Yeah, well, it's basically that God is contradictory. Like a lot of the stuff that they teach, God leads to logical contradictions. You love people so much, but then you send them off for eternal pain and torture. But there's other points.
The eternal pain and torture, to the extent that it happens, isn't an exercise of God's love. It's an exercise of God's justice.
Right. But he knows everything that is going to happen. That was another point. So let's go back to the Garden of Eden. And God knows when he's putting the tree of knowledge there, he knows that when he's putting it there, and he's telling them not to eat from it, he knows they're going to eat from it, doesn't he?
Yeah, but now you're no longer talking about the God of classical theism. You're specifically talking about a God that is consistent with a literal reading of Genesis, which isn't even in the ballpark of consistent with most Christians,
So
let alone most God believers.
a lot of Christians would say that the Garden of Eden is not a literal story. It's what would it be?
Well, William Lane Craig says it's mytho-history. It's meant to teach us the nature of how this thing came about, but not the actual events of how it came about. So it tells us how we're supposed to feel about it, but not necessarily spelling out that if we could travel back in time, that you could set the TARDIS down and watch Eve eat an apple.
Right. So they don't think it's a literal event. They think it's a story.
We're just trying to say there's a spectrum. There's entirely a spectrum. There's the Christianity I grew up in absolutely would affirm that if you had a time machine, you could watch Eve eat an apple or eat some kind of piece of fruit. So it's just a huge spectrum. That's the problem with pinning some of this stuff down. That's why
that's what I'm thinking. I'm trying to pin you guys down, and most of my points you're saying, well, not really. I guess probably the only point then would be, does God know everything that's going to happen?
Depends on who you ask. There are people who think that God knew everything from before anything, and there are people who think that God knows everything but does not know your free will actions. There's complicated answers to all of these. This is why, generally speaking, it's pointless for someone to call in and say, hey, I've got an argument to present against a God, because you've got the God that you're arguing against is at best a moderate straw man of, it's probably somebody's God, but
well, I did go to Catholic school, and they were teaching me in Catholic school that hell is the real place where you're going to burn forever. So this argument goes against it. And there's lots of people I know that have had many of these definitions that God knows everything that's going to happen, and of course there's people out there that don't, but I think a large majority of them do, and this argument goes against them. But I can understand your point of view. I'm not trying to paint a broad brush against all religions, because I agreed with the first question you asked me, which is, can you define the God? And this is the God that I encounter with most people in my life, the points that they believe. And when I'm not a believer, I don't argue with them. I'm very kind, and I say that's gracious of you. But in my head, I think this is very contradictory.
So yes, Anthony, there are loads of things, especially in like Catholic doctrine and others, that are apparently contradictory. I would argue that the concept of the Trinity itself is already nonsensical and antithetical to logic. But yeah, it's, you say, oh, I was raised Catholic, so I've got an argument against Catholic God. Cool.
Okay. Well, can I switch gears with one other thing that I want to talk to you? It's not on the topic real quick. And it's just something that I don't think anybody's ever brought up with you two or on any of these channels. So I thought it'd be interesting to just
if you legitimately bring up something that nobody's ever brought up to either of us on these shows, I will absolutely be stunned. So let's do that.
I've listened to so many of your shows. I've never heard anybody bring this up. That is, I recently lost somebody that was very close to me, and I'm dealing with a lot of grief. And while I'm starting to tear up now.
Yep, I'm sorry.
I've thought about how atheists have a harder time dealing with grief than people that are religious. And when I went to write up some information about this person that had passed away, I naturally thought of creating a website that had clouds and blue sky. And even though I'm not a theist, I was drawn to that imagery of using that type of background to create a memoriam for this person. And I was a little bit ticked off by all the people that came up to me and wanted to bless me or invite me to have something at the church that I went to, or to try and console me, because I'm interested in believing things that are true, not things that make you feel better. And the thing that I don't know if you guys have discussed is how theists can deal better with it, how the difference in grief that theists have to go through when they've lost somebody that they love, knowing that there's no afterlife, or as much as you can know, and how to deal with that versus how a theist would deal with that. So, is that a subject that has been brought up, dealing with grief as an atheist?
Yes, there's literally an organization called Grief Beyond Belief. It's been around for 15 or 20 years.
I mean, on your show.
Yes, I've mentioned the organization every time somebody calls in about dealing with grief from a secular perspective.
Okay.
Well, and Shannon Q has actually hosted this show. She has lost quite a bit of family these last several years, and I know at least on 2 occasions where she hosted the same week where she lost someone, and this kind of stuff came up. So, but that's not to belittle the topic. I mean, it's a weird challenge to say, have you ever talked about this versus the seriousness of the topic? Which would you prefer we talk about? Do you actually want some advice on that, or were you just doing a survey about whether
the thing was mostly dealing with all the people that, because a large portion of the people that I know are religious, and dealing with them wanting to bless me or engage in conversations about going to heaven. I guess one option would be say, I don't believe in any of that stuff, and you could just keep it to yourself. But I don't engage them in saying I don't believe this stuff. I just say, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and leave it be. But I think maybe the honest position would be to then engage them and say, there's no reason to believe in this guy, and start, that kind of debate. But what are you guys' opinions on that?
I'm out. So if I go to a funeral, people are just probably going to know that I don't believe in any of the religious stuff or the God stuff at all. But for people who don't know, I tend to try to take their words in the spirit that they're offered, in the sense that this person is just as much an indoctrinated victim of religion as anybody else, and they are coping with an incredibly difficult situation in probably the only way that they know how. And so when they're trying to say things that they think are nice things that I actually have serious objections to, but you can either push back against them. And generally, I would say, for the most part, funerals probably aren't the place to be pushing back on people's religious talk. It doesn't do very little good for the other people there, who are going to be a mixed audience. You're going to start a brawl over whether or not grandma went to heaven. I'm not. And the other thing is that for me, it should be about whose beliefs are prioritized. So when I die, I don't care what you do with the scraps of me. I would like for anything that's useful to somebody else, let them have it. Just carve up all the little pieces, and if there's something that's not horribly broken or whatever else, give it to them. And then after you've gotten that stuff done, burn it, throw it away, sink it to the bottom of the ocean, do whatever. I don't need to occupy land. I don't need a headstone. I don't care if people, it actually make me feel a little weird knowing people were regularly like coming to my grave to put flowers on it or whatever else. But that's the difference, is the people who are there going there to put flowers on it, that's the way they are dealing with grief. And so while I know what my preferences would be, I'm also dead. So if you want to take this body after I'm dead and ignore my wishes and have a big open casket celebration in the biggest cathedral and lie to everybody and claim that I found Jesus just right at the end, that would irritate the shit out of me, except I'm dead, so it can't bother me at all.
Right. I agree with that. I think the only sticking point I had was, just them coming up to me, not at funerals, where they're approaching me or saying, hey, we're going to have something at the church and we would like you to come, and it'll be about her. And we're not at the church. They're asking me outside of church. I'm like, oh, no, thank you. But the reality of it is like, I want to tell her she was not a believer. I'm not a believer. We want nothing to do with the church. And I'm just nice. And maybe if more people spoke up about in situations like that, where they said, I'm not a believer and I don't want anything to do with this, people go, oh, there are atheists out there. But It's kind of like I feel like I'm in hiding over this whole thing, which makes it worse.
That's the way a lot of atheist secularists are every day.
Okay.
And I think outside of the funeral situation, I think you're right. If it's up to you, you're under no obligation to bear upon your shoulders the normalizing of the word atheist. But some of us need to. You're right. Some of us need to take that on, or it will never be normalized. And I think your instincts are probably right that outside of a church, especially if the person who passed wasn't a believer, I think you're probably right to at least ask the question, well, that's interesting. As far as I know, they weren't a believer. Why is there something happening at church for that person? Is not an unreasonable attack, right? Like those seem like reasonable questions you could posit, or to say, well, that's not what the deceased person would think, or those all seem like gentle ways that you could at least normalize. I often advocate for the starting gradual, right? Like you don't jump straight in with Jesus didn't exist, even if that's what you believe. You saying, hey, well, maybe angels don't exist, or maybe our interpretation of this passage is wrong. You can work your way in. So those are, I'm with you. You're under no obligation to normalize atheism, but those sound like good opportunities if you are so inclined.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you talking, and I feel like I've achieved something because Matt did not want to yell at me. So that's great. And you guys keep up the good work. And I hope Kamala Harris wins in 2024. Anything else?
That would
No,
be a good
the
wrap for the
temptation
season.
to yell at you is greater than it's ever been.
What is that? I didn't hear that.
I said, no, I don't have anything else, but the temptation to yell at you is greater than it's ever been.
No, why? What did I do?
Well, you said you made it out without me yelling at you, and that clearly is tempting me to
Okay,
yell
I
at you.
get it.
In the same way, if
Okay,
someone
well,
said you can't eat broccoli right now, I'm like, well, now I want to eat broccoli. I didn't before, so it's just one of those things.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd love to talk to you some more, but it's fair to give it the phone over to the other callers. Okay.
Sweet. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Anthony.
All right. Bye.
So we got another call here that I'm going to get to in just a second, but we don't have any theists. I'm sorry that nobody feels up to defending their God belief. It may be that we just don't get any theists for the rest of the show, but lines are open for the theists 720-619-2288. I'm also probably going to spend the rest of the evening running diagnostics on my machine to find out why my vMix and camera setup is a freaking nightmare of stuttering and freezing. But it's the issue of dealing with grief has come up tons over the years, and I think it's because there's this common feeling that, what do we say? Like, religion has so co-opted death and dying and grief that it feels like there's nothing that secularists can say. Oh, they're with the Lord now, they're in heaven. All the platitudes and religious stuff, language that people toss out. And it struck me as it's not that we have nothing to say, it's that we don't feel the need to lie or embellish. And when somebody passes, somebody dies, somebody is no longer a part of our lives, it's really easy for me to just say, wow, I'm really sorry that person died. They were important to me. They're important to you. I love you. I understand you're grieving. All of those things are fine. I don't have to say God needed another angel, or he's in heaven now, or you can go down even some of the more, I guess, some of the sort of secular platitudes that people might think are trite but aren't, which is, well, he's not in pain anymore. And quite frankly, as someone who deals with chronic pain, I get that. And there's going to come a time in my life where I'm going to very clearly be living and be living with the recognition that I'd rather not be. I remember I sat down with my grandma when she was 91. We were just playing cards, and she was like, "Oh, Matthew, I hope nobody should ever have to live this long. Getting old as hell." And she's 91 at the time. And I was like, "Yeah, I won't pretend to know, Grandma, but I'm pretty sure that if I'm 91 and I'm sitting around playing cards with my grandkids, it'll be okay." And she was like, "Yeah, you're right." And it was nice to see that even when somebody they're ready for the end. Like, she knew she'd lived a full life, that the nice things and the good things about life were going to become more diminished as she continued living. And she was ready. And yet she sits there with the recognition that death's going to come for me at some point, and I'm okay with that, because every day is a little bit worse. Every day is just a smidgen worse. And I would like to die before it gets so bad that I'm begging to die, type of thing. And I've had friends, with terminal illnesses. I mean, you guys have seen Dave Warnock on the channel as well, but I've had other friends who sought out medical assistance and supported the very death with dignity cause that many of us are advocating for. We need to do a better job as secularists of getting information out, so that you shouldn't feel frustrated because you're at a funeral and you can't tell someone he's in heaven. Tell them the true part. Tell them the part that matters. That, is there anything I can do to help you? Oh, would you like to talk about it? Do you just want to have a good cry? Would you rather we just ate dinner in silence and processed it? Would you rather that we turned all the other stuff off and just sat down and watched a fake fire on the TV because it's too hot outside to build an actual fire and sit next to it? Whatever. The types of things that allow you to interact with somebody on a personal level don't require platitudes and lies. They don't require God needed another angel. It's, no matter what happened, if there's an afterlife, it's a bonus. You know, it'll come as quite the surprise. All right, let's see here. We've got Travis is calling from California. Travis is an atheist, and he wants to talk about the word knowledge. So, how you doing, Travis?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm all right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, just fine.
Okay, fantastic. And to clarify, it's not the word knowledge, it's just the word know, K-N-O-W. I want to talk about know and knowing. Thanks to this channel, actually, I got introduced to the concept of solipsism. And with that came the realization that, I can't actually know anything at all. And so then I asked myself, why then no? Is that incorrect?
Solipsism doesn't mean you can't know things.
Well, solipsism, from my understanding, is that for lack of better terms, it's like I can't prove that I'm not a brain in a vat, and all of this is being beamed into my mind.
Sure. Any number of thought experiments like that, you cannot disprove the problem of hard solipsism. That doesn't mean you can't.
So I cannot. Well, no. So what I'm saying is the concept of know, as it is in my mind, has this sense of certainty or absolutism.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. Knowledge doesn't require certainty. Okay. I don't think you can be certain about anything.
Well, no, I don't. So knowledge, I just look at as the collection of things that we believe to be true. My thing is that I understand that knowledge is used as a synonym for many words, or knowing, sorry, not knowledge. Knowing is used as a synonym for many words. I've used it in place of belief. I use it in place of remember, I use it in place of recognize, but why do I use that word instead of those other ones when they're basically saying the same thing? What is the reason that I elevate? They're not.
Knowledge is a subset of belief.
Knowledge is, okay, so what is the difference? So what is the difference then between knowing and believing?
Confidence. Now, in philosophy, knowledge is sometimes defined as justified true belief, in the sense that you believe something, it is true, and you have justification for that belief. Because believing something that's true without justification, we generally don't consider that knowledge of any worth, because, you could just, if I say, oh, I believe that you roll a die, and I say, I believe it landed on a 3, and I got it right. I believed it was a 3. It's true that it was a 3, but I was just guessing blind. So we don't tend to count that as knowledge. Then there's, but the more colloquial use of knowledge. So when I say I know something, when I say I know a thing, it could be that I'm saying I'm familiar with it. It could be that I'm saying I've experienced it directly. It could be that I am claiming to have knowledge of it. When you use know as the intransitive verb, you're basically saying I know, or I have knowledge of this. Now, in that sense, I reject the justified true belief definition, because I don't know how we can get to truth, which I guess touches a little bit on what you were dealing with hard solipsism. But the key issue here is that, generally speaking, when people say I know something, they're saying,
yes,
believe this to such a high degree of confidence that it would be worldview altering. Oh my God, are you going to keep interrupting me while I'm giving you a fucking definition over and over again?
Yes, my apologies.
So generally speaking, when people say I know something or I have knowledge of something, they're saying I believe this and feel justified, or I believe this to such a high degree of confidence that it would be worldview altering to discover I'm wrong. That's what people generally mean when they talk about knowledge.
Okay. Yes, I understand that. My point of contention is that I think all beliefs should be justified, and I don't think there needs to be another level of belief. I think because for me, when I think of, like, I'm saying that I'm knowing, when I said there's like synonyms for what I use it for, like what you said, you are saying that you just believe with the highest degree of confidence. But I want the highest degree of confidence in all of my beliefs. And since the way that I see the universe, sorry, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I said tough. That's not the way belief works. Belief is merely the acceptance of a proposition. It's just, I'm convinced that this is most likely true. There's a reason there's a reason why knowledge is typically defined as justified true belief. It's because you can believe something, that means to be convinced of something, and you can be convinced for bad reasons. You can be convinced inappropriately. And so this is why the fact that you are convinced is separate from why you're convinced.
Okay. There's something that you said at the beginning that I wanted to respond to that I lost as you were talking. I'm going to try and grab it, and I apologize if I don't do it accurately. But when it comes to, this is what it was. As I understand how I view the universe, it is purely subjective, because that's what it is to perceive, is that everything that is coming at me, I am perceiving, and I only can accept it. That is what it is to exist, is to simply accept things, and I have to decide how I accept, or how do I say this? Everything is like, when you're saying like belief and knowing, my thing about belief is that is actually what I am doing all the time, is I am accepting the things that I am seeing as truth. I can say that I know them, but it isn't what's actually happening in my mind isn't any different than when I'm saying I believe it. So if I remove this construct of knowing that is higher than that, then I can see the world as just that, is everyone talking about their beliefs. And then what we can do is we can see which beliefs overlap, which is what I look at science as being, is just our understanding of the world that we are all expressing to each other. And then those understandings overlap. And then that is what we call knowledge. But what we are doing to it is simply believing it.
Knowledge is a subset of belief. Knowledge is a belief.
Sorry, knowledge is a belief. Yeah, yes, I understand that. That's what I'm saying. But I'm saying that like how. Okay, I guess I may not be presenting myself
Travis, do you
clearly.
think?
Yes, sir.
Let's see if I'm understanding you correctly. I'm just going to try and bounce it back to you. You can tell me if I'm interpreting this wrong. That you would reject the notion that belief confidence has a spectrum, or should. You're using the word should. So in an idealized world, there would be belief would just be binary.
I was clarifying how I use the word should. I don't believe in like a larger should. That's just in my worldview, how I think would make communication easier. That's when I use. That's how I use the word should.
So, and within that within your dream communication scenario, belief would just be binary. It would be you either believe or you do not. There would be no thing that you believe in with lesser confidence or greater confidence. Confidence would be just binary. Is that what you are communicating / advocating?
Yes, I believe that belief is what I come to at the end of the road. It's not where I start. And so until I get to the point of belief, but Travis, everything leading up to that isn't.
Travis, if there's a road, then you're agreeing that there's a spectrum of confidence, right? Because you can be closer to the end or closer to the start.
I believe the spectrum of confidence is leading to belief. It's not of belief. It is, I exist in disbelief until I get to belief. And I have a spectrum of, I guess a spectrum of disbelief would feel more accurate. But the point of belief, I think, is binary. But until I get to belief, I exist in disbelief.
I thought I maybe was following you, but now I think I'm less confident that I'm following your point.
It's really straightforward and simple. For any proposition X, if you are convinced that X is likely true, then you believe X.
Sorry, say that one more. Say that one more time. Where's my pen?
For any proposition X, if you are convinced that X is probably true, then you believe X.
And I'm failing to make the what you are trying to convey to me through that. I'm sorry, I'm missing it.
Belief merely means that you are convinced something is true. That is separate from whether or not you have good reason.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. What would you call a state where somebody believes something, but they don't yet have a good reason to believe it?
That they don't have a good reason to believe it?
Oh my God.
Sorry, I am neurodivergent, so I'm repeating these for myself so that I can make sure that I actually answer what you asked and not answer what I want to ask. So I apologize for that. I mean, I'm not actually apologizing for that because it's a...
In your view, what's the difference between a belief and knowledge?
So in my world, the difference between, it's hard to say this. So when I hear the word knowledge, I'm not talking about knowledge, because knowledge I see as a collection that we can refer to, whether it's physical or subjective.
I give up. I'm so exhausted from this, Travis. We can't even get past dictionary fucking definitions. Knowledge.
No, yes, I'm sorry. That's what I'm contending.
Do you know what epistemology is?
I believe so. Is it the study of the evolution of words?
No. Not even in the ballpark. Epistemology is the philosophical study of how do we know what we know? What qualifies as knowledge? Knowledge is not a collection of knows. Knowledge is another term. Even a single fact that is known is knowledge, right?
Yes.
So why do you view knowledge as only a collection of facts? If that collection only has one, it's still knowledge, right?
Yes, I agree with that. It is, but it is still a collection, is it not? Even if it's only a collection of one?
Yes, it's a collection of one. Now, why are you making a distinction between a collection of one and other collections and saying that knowledge isn't the term that should be applied to a collection of one?
No. I'm not saying that at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think let's try maybe this way. What I am saying is the word KNOW, as we use it in conversation, inherently gives a sense of objectivity that we can't actually.
No, it doesn't. You can't say your subjective interpretation of the word "no" is an inherent thing. It's definitionally not inherent when you are doing the interpretation. If you look up dictionary definitions,
I agree.
How can you fucking keep agreeing with me when I keep correcting you?
No, because I believe that what is happening is what I have in my head, I am not explaining using the proper language. And so when you are saying things, they don't contradict actually what's in my head, but my ability to express it is what's at fault here. And so that's why I'm trying to come at different angles, because I agree with most of what you are saying. My point is that word, the word "no," is unnecessary in our language.
No, and
when trying to, sorry, say that one more. You said it's not.
No, it's fucking not. If I say I believe the keys are in the other room, and I say I know the keys are in the other room, that is conveying two different things. And for me, the difference is confidence level.
Yes, but I understand that the confidence level is different, but is what is actually happening any different between, like, as far as not the level of, but it's the level of what? When you say confidence,
I've said this since the first fucking question you asked me. What's the difference? And I said confidence. I've now said confidence about 4 or 5 times. That's the difference.
Yes. Okay. So that's okay. So this may be helpful. Then maybe it is that I believe that knowing gives a false confidence to reality that we can't actually have.
Well,
and so using words that don't have that level of confidence will give the conversation
confidence. You just dismissed all confidence as false confidence.
No, I'm not dismissing all confidence.
You literally just did.
When
you literally just said that. No. Stop interrupting me. You literally just pointed out that using the word is a problem because the difference is false confidence. What about proper confidence? For example, I'm pretty confident that we landed on the moon. I know that we landed on the moon.
Yes.
Is that false confidence?
No, it is not false confidence.
No,
what
it's
I'm saying.
So you don't get to dismiss the difference between believe and know as if it's false confidence. It's confidence.
Yes, I'm not saying it is necessarily false, but it may be overreaching. Does that feel better?
No. It is pointless for us to spend any time to say that your knowledge may be overreaching. Yes, that's true. So what? It may also not be overreaching, right?
Yeah, yes, but we have language that is inherently not overreaching.
Why point out that knowledge may or may not be correct as if that's a problem? We already fucking know that.
Well, so because this came up when speaking with my family who is religious and trying to have a conversation about what it is that I am experiencing. And when I use the word that, like, well, I know these things in science and I know this and I know that, to them, it felt like I was on a pedestal as far as how strong capable of believing versus how strongly they were capable of believing. And then when I said, okay, well, let's not say that I know anything. Let's just say these are my beliefs and here's all my reasoning for my beliefs. Now let's look at your beliefs and you tell me all your reasoning for your beliefs. And now where we are is at a similar level. We are both talking about our beliefs because that is actually, like, internally, no matter how confident I can be when I say that I know, what I'm feeling, that level of confidence isn't more than someone that says that they believe with that same level of confidence. And so I think that not saying that we know and just talking about either like belief or using the other words that have more of a subjective, from my perspective, I'm not saying inherently, but when I use them, they feel more subjective and softer in conversation and allows me to feel like I'm actually talking at the same level. Yes.
Let me suggest that in these conversations, maybe you use the word conclusion instead of belief, or it sounds like that would be a softer word that everyone could agree to. I have concluded this and you've concluded that, even though it's essentially synonym. Yes, but the fact that in your situation that the words are problematic, English is very problematic in a myriad of situations, doesn't eliminate the utility of the words in other conversations, right? Matt demonstrated, for example, he might be communicating to his partner that he believes the keys might be at a certain spot, which means that she should look there first, but maybe not expect them to be there, versus he knows they're in a certain spot. He gave that example, and that she should share his confidence. Like, that gives you communicate something important. So just because a word is problematic in one situation, like you described, that doesn't mean that it is doesn't have utility in other situations. Would you agree with that?
I do agree that it has utility, but I don't think the utility may always be worth it. So in the example that you gave, where would you say, I believe the keys are in there, or I know the keys are in there, I would argue that you would just say, where are the keys? They're in there.
What fucking difference does it make in both statements saying, I believe the keys are in there and I know the keys are in there, because knowledge is a subset of belief? In both of those situations, the person is telling you that they believe the keys are in the other room. And when they say they know the keys are in the other room, they're saying, I believe it very strongly. If you're fucking sitting here, stop. If you're fucking sitting here picking nits over whether or not they should say the word no, and your reason for saying they shouldn't say the word no is because you think no implies certainty, too fucking bad. In both cases, we are talking about a belief they have, and in one case, they are expressing how confident they are. And that's important, because let's say Arden and I are packing up to go to a reptile expo, which we're going to be doing a reptile expo in shirts next weekend. And when Arden says, hey, do you know where the keys are for the displays? And if I say, I believe there's one upstairs in your office, and I know there's one in the truck, have I conveyed useful information to Arden?
Yes.
In both cases, right?
Yes.
Does that mean that I'm saying I'm certain?
of one, yes. When you say
No,
you know,
it doesn't.
there's
No,
one
it doesn't.
there.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I don't think you can be certain about anything. I am never professing certainty, ever. When I say that I know there's a pair in the truck, what that means is that I'm more confident that there are keys in the truck than I am that there are keys in this other one. And I'm more confident for a number of different reasons, not the least of which is I'm the one that put the keys in the truck, closed it. Nobody else has been in there that I know of since I did it. I don't know what's happened with the keys that were down in her office. So my confidence level about the position of two different keys is different. And when I say, I believe there's a set of keys in your office and I know there's a set of keys in the truck, I'm not saying I'm absolutely certain. I'm expressing an incredibly high confidence level, as in it would be worldview altering for me to discover I'm wrong, but I'm acknowledging that I could be wrong. As long as that's the case, there's no reason for me not to say, I know there's a pair of keys in the truck.
The reason that demonstrates that Matt is correct on this is because we know that there is a difference between I know the keys are in the truck and I'm certain the keys are in the truck. We actually we've agreed on this call that those two things have a qualitative difference. So belief and certainty, or knowledge and certainty, already, even in this call, you've demonstrated that even you accept that there's a difference between those terms. So,
but yes. Travis, we managed to get some theistic callers, Travis, and I think we've run over this just about enough for everybody to pause and think some more about it.
May I please say one last thing before I go?
I guess.
And I'll thank you. So I understand. So what you are saying is correct, that it does have utility, and that's why the word has been part of our language for so long. I think what I was trying to get at is that some people can infer this level of certainty from it. And if it is, yes, I understand that, but if the word is unnecessary and not
unnecessary, you've already acknowledged that word. No, stop.
Yes, no, its ability to add use to our language does not mean it is inherently necessary.
Stop.
It just means it is useful. Usefulness and necessity are not.
Don't ever fucking call me again. You already acknowledged that I was providing additional useless and useful information. You don't get to then pretend that it's useless in your closing fucking bullshit. Let me get one last dig in. You are wrong. You don't understand epistemology. You don't understand knowledge. You don't understand you don't understand how people are talking. And we explained it over and over and over and over again, that saying, I believe X and I know X communicates 3, actually probably, useful ideas. You don't get to acknowledge that and then pretend like you were right the whole fucking time. Unbelievable.
He meant
Robin,
etymology.
Who says if you start with belief, you don't end up with the problem of being trapped with things you don't, or you can't be sure of. So welcome, Robert. Are you sure of everything, I guess?
Hi. Yeah. So this is actually my first time calling in. I've actually tried calling in before this. It just didn't work out. But there are some blaringly obvious problems with your worldview, right? Coming from a theistic perspective, I think there's something that you should probably really listen carefully to, just given the fact that theists aren't calling in. Maybe theists aren't calling in because they understand that based on your worldview, it's impossible to provide you with what you're looking for, right? You're asking for
That's not a problem with
evidence.
My worldview. That's a problem with your claim.
Well, so it depends, right? Because the issue is whether, and actually it's so funny that this ties into the last caller's point. His point is about truth and belief. And I think based on what you've said in many other videos, is that you said truth is that which is demonstrable, right? So
no, I said truth is that which comports with reality.
Well, so then that's circular, right? Because truth and reality are essentially synonymous. They're the same thing.
It's not circular. Truth doesn't necessarily. Yeah. There are other definitions of truth other than that which comports with reality. There are other models of truth.
Right, but if you don't believe that there is such a thing as a certainty, a person can be certain about something, can find the capital T truth, then it is somewhat futile, right? From an atheistic perspective, it's futile
I'm
to
sorry,
claim
Rob.
to be a
If
truth
you're going to
seeker.
call in and say there's a problem with my worldview, it'd be nice if you got my worldview right and didn't misrepresent it.
Okay.
So what's the problem with
So
my
then
worldview?
please explain to me what is
No,
truth.
what's the problem with my
Yeah,
worldview?
so-
You called in to tell me there's a problem with my worldview. What is it?
Sure. So from what I understand, you can correct me if I'm wrong, from what I understand about your worldview, you believe that there is no such thing as a capital T truth, or that you can't be certain about what is truth. One of the two. If you can tell me which of those is accurate, then
I don't see
I'll
a path
proceed
to
from there.
absolute certainty, but I do see a path to maximal confidence.
Okay. But do you believe that actual absolute truth does exist, that capital T truth exists?
Well, I guess taking capital T, is there some truth? Yeah, I think Descartes pretty much solved that whether or not we have access to it is independent of whether or not there is truth.
And yet you call yourself a truth seeker, right? You're seeking truth,
Yes,
or at least maximal confidence
because to
that
me, truth doesn't require certainty.
truth does not require certainty. It requires a level of
Correct.
confidence, I think you've said.
No,
Okay.
so
No.
So if you
that's not what I said.
Okay.
So I am investigating the world and doing using the best tools to make sure that my internal model of reality matches reality as best as possible. Even if it never matches exactly, even if there's no chance that I get to a perfect understanding of reality, there are better understandings of reality and worse understandings of reality. And the cornerstone of my epistemology is to use the methods that consistently produce more reliable understandings of reality. So, for example, if I'm going to cross the street and I look both ways and I don't see a bus, I could cross the street. But if it turns out I have a flawed data intake, there may be a bus coming that's going to take me out, and that would wipe me out. But whether or not the bus is
Right, and
real
that's
whether or not the bus is real in an absolute sense, in a are we in the matrix sense, I don't think there's any solution to the problem of hard solipsism. But I must deal with the reality that I'm experiencing right now, because if I try to pretend that the reality I'm experiencing right now isn't real, I will probably die.
You'll probably be dead, right? Exactly. And this is why, because in the most immediate sense, it has utility. In the most immediate sense, meaning your physical being is at stake, your mental being is at stake, and so on and so forth. But you see, the issue of God is something that is, because God is defined as something that is supernatural outside of reality from the empirical perspective, then you're dealing with something that has a consequence, and knowing and understanding it has a consequence to your spiritual self, right? And so it's impossible really to provide something.
So basically, you're saying that when it comes to God, there's no way to demonstrate it empirically, and this is going to have consequences on something else you can't demonstrate empirically.
Well, only because empiricism is not the only avenue to truth according to what we believe.
I didn't say it was.
Maybe according to what your world. But see, that's what your worldview is, not my world.
If you're going to make, would you stop? If you're going to make the claim that there is a spiritual realm, you need to demonstrate it. And that means you need to show what your method is for confirming that it's real. And if you're not going to use logic and reason and empirical evidence, then you need to demonstrate what method and mechanism you're going to use and how we can be confident that that method and mechanism is reliable. What is your path to understanding the supernatural?
Yes, so as I'm a Muslim, as I mentioned, I don't know if they mentioned that to you, but Muslims believe that there are three. Yeah, so Muslims believe, because we have a different worldview than the atheistic worldview, our worldview is that there are three paths to certainty and to truth. And that is haqqul yaqeen, ilmul yaqeen, and aynul yaqeen. What does it mean? It means essentially certainty of truth, which comes from revelation. So we start with belief in God. We start there, that God is something that we believe.
That's a flawed epistemology, because if you start with belief, you haven't justified it.
No, it's a presupposition, just like you have presuppositions in your worldview. Every worldview has presuppositions.
Presuppose the supernatural. You need to demonstrate it.
Why not?
Presupposing is not an epistemology.
You presuppose that maths work, so therefore you can't use
what?
math if you don't have. You presuppose, according to your worldview, that math works, right? That the axioms and so forth are real and they work.
No,
okay,
Rob.
So
you can keep calling in and asserting what our
suppositions.
worldview is and getting it wrong, because this will make for good content. But I'm asking you, what sound epistemology can you use to justify your God thing? And your answer is, we just presuppose God. Well, I'm sorry.
Exactly,
That's
it's true.
And
That's
it
what
shouldn't be
we do.
convincing to anyone.
But then that would mean you would have to throw out every presupposition according to your worldview, because presuppositions don't have demonstrable
I'm sorry, but
evidence.
throwing out one presupposition does not mean you have to throw them all out.
So why did you pick and choose?
I didn't pick and choose.
Why did
You're
you
the
pick?
one that's saying you presupposed God, and I'm asking you to do. Okay, here's the real thing. Apart from presupposing God, do you have any way to demonstrate to us that God is real?
So you're always going to do the same thing. This is what was my point.
Yes, I'm always going to do the same thing because I'm a skeptic and I'm a rational person, and I care whether or not my beliefs are more likely to be true. That's why I'm asking you the question. And so I'll ask you the question again. Do you have some way of showing, other than presupposition, that God is real?
So as I mentioned, it's going to come from
sorry, that's a yes or no question.
Non-physical evidence.
I'm sorry, but that's a yes or no question.
Non-physical evidence.
I'm sorry, but that's a yes or no question. Do you have some method beyond assertion, presupposition, by which you can demonstrate that God is real? Yes or no?
If by what you said you mean empiricism, then no, there is.
Okay. You don't need to put any qualifiers in it. The purpose here is we're trying to figure out if you have any way to demonstrate God, because this is really simple, Rob. If you presuppose God, neither of us are going to agree with you, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to get us to agree. You have no way of moving forward, because presupposing is not a sound epistemology. And if you can't demonstrate that your God is real, then we're at an impasse. And it's not a problem with my worldview. It's a problem with your worldview, because you believe something that you cannot demonstrate.
I'm not sure if you can hear me or not, but I definitely can tell you that there are. Okay, good. So the way to understand something that is immaterial, you have to use inference, and you have to use inductive reasoning, and you have to use abductions. That's the only way that you can
prove it. Science is inference and inductive reasoning. Prove that inference and inductive reasoning. So that's science. Let's show me the science for God.
Great. So if that is the case, and you agree that we can use abductions and inductive reasoning and logic and so forth, then
wow, this is so wild how you add in shit that we didn't say. I'm fine with inference.
Did I misunderstand you?
I don't like abductive reasoning, because when it's fine in certain usages, but if you're going to argue towards the best explanation, you don't ever get to use God or the supernatural, because you haven't even demonstrated that those should be candidate explanations. So there is no sound abductive argument.
That's just a rule. That's just a rule. That's just a rule that you made up. Just like when you call something a logical fallacy,
it doesn't matter whether I made it up or not. What matters is whether or not that's likely to be more accurate in determining the facts about reality. So.
Yeah, but your accurate is your subjective point. That doesn't make it actually accurate or not, unless you're using these reasonings.
If you're using with something you believe that you acknowledge you can't demonstrate, and you're going to say my epistemology.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that I couldn't demonstrate it. I can easily demonstrate it.
And demonstrate it.
The moment I will. And the moment I demonstrate it, you're going to say this is not
now.
Listen
I don't
carefully.
Need your.
Okay?
Right, let me put you on mute. I don't need your fucking preamble of what you think I'm going to say when you actually do the demonstration that you think you can do. I need you to do the demonstration. So demonstrate right now that a God exists.
Okay, here we go. Logical fallacy. It is, how does something exist rather than not exist? That's the first question. You're going to call it a logical fallacy. Does that make it wrong? No, it just means that you're categorizing it as something.
That's actually just a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, all we said was.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want you to do the demonstration, and the first words that came out of your mouth were fallacy. It either exists or rather than not exist. You didn't even make a cogent statement. So try one more time. What's the demonstration that a God exists?
In order for there to be something, there must be something to create it. There must be power to create it. Some power created a universe, matter, energy.
Are you saying it's impossible that something always existed?
I'm saying it's completely impossible. And there isn't any evidence to support that there is a possibility for it.
So it's impossible for something to have always existed.
It's absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible. And not even in line with causality.
God always existed?
God is not a thing. It's absolutely outside.
God is a thing. There's a reason why other versions of like cosmological arguments and stuff start with everything that begins to exist, because they need to make a loophole for God because God didn't begin to exist. But there must be something. To whatever extent we have a way to find out why the universe, reality, is the way it is. That's through scientific investigation. You don't get to presuppose a God, and you don't get to say, gosh, something exists. There must have been something that made this something, and I'm going to say that it's a God. You didn't make any demonstration that there's any God, and you can't get to a demonstration that there is a God by just asserting that in order for there to be something, there had to be something else that made it. No, you've precluded the notion that something in some form or another always existed. We'll try again. Maverick is it Minnesota?
Yeah, you betcha. Doing really good here in Minnesota.
Yeah, I don't believe that for 1 second, Maverick. Can we get back to seriousness?
Yes, your skepticism is justified. All right, so I think knowledge of moral wrongness is evidence for theism. But to explain that, I should explain. What was that?
Knowledge of moral wrongness.
Yeah, that we have moral knowledge that there is such a thing as moral wrongness. Like, for example, it's morally wrong to torture an infant just for fun. We know that, for example.
Okay. What about the areas where you think something's morally wrong and I don't agree?
Well, that would be a disagreement, but I wouldn't show that we don't know that anything is morally wrong.
Oh, no, I agree. But let's say that you and I agree that torturing an infant for fun is immoral. How does that, if you're convinced that that's immoral and I'm convinced that that's immoral, how does our shared convincement point to a God?
Well, a shared convincement doesn't. It's the knowledge that something is morally wrong that does. And to explain that, I should explain by
knowledge.
Knowledge, like properly justified true belief.
Yeah, that's not the usage of knowledge I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, you and I both believe that torturing an infant for fun is morally wrong, right?
Well, I'm not sure that's true, because I've seen atheists and theists talk past each other on what morality means.
I'm sorry, Maverick. It doesn't matter what you've seen from other atheists. You said,
okay.
Hang on. You said that torturing infants for fun is morally wrong. Do you believe that?
Yes.
And so do I. So now we can say, and Paul, do you believe that?
I do.
So cool. All three of us are convinced that torturing an infant for fun is morally wrong. How does that point to a God?
Well, first I should explain what I mean by moral wrongness, because I've seen atheists and theists talk past each other.
Okay. Maverick, this would be a lot easier if you just answer the question. I've done this a dozen times, but I'll stop. How does the fact that the three of us agree on a moral question demonstrate that it's a God, that there is a God?
Well, I never said it does. I didn't say that an agreement does.
You said moral knowledge is evidence for theism.
Yes, not moral belief, moral knowledge.
The three of us, okay. Wow. Paul, do you know that torturing a child for fun is immoral?
Well, I know that for me, morality has to do with reducing harm and increasing flourishing. And I can evaluate whether or not torturing a baby for fun increases suffering and decreases flourishing. So I can evaluate that, and I can then have confidence that based on my perception of reality and my perception of morality, that would be an action that would be against the things that I consider to be moral. So yes, I would under that definition, I would know that this was wrong.
And similarly,
that's not the definition of world wrongness that I'm using, though. So that's why I think it'd be.
I don't accept your definition of moral wrongness. Then.
Okay, so you don't. So because my definition of moral wrongness is where it's that type of ought that does not have only descriptive qualities. So kind of like the ought that David Hume seemed to have in mind with his ought distinction. So you don't believe in that type of moral wrongness.
I'm not even sure what you're talking about. We have beliefs about whether something is immoral, whether something is morally wrong. All three of us are convinced of this, and you're saying that moral knowledge isn't the moral knowledge you're talking about.
Well, perhaps if you give me an opportunity to explain what I mean by moral wrongness, it might become clearer. So an action is morally wrong for someone only if they ought not do it, but we can use words like ought and should in a couple of different ways. So in some cases, the word ought is reducible to something purely descriptive. So for example, if you want to do well in school, you ought to study just means something like, as a matter of practical necessity, you need to study to do well in school. But then there's that type of ought that prescribes in a way that is not purely descriptive. For example, someone saying you shouldn't torture infants might be using this type of ought. And this is the type of ought I'm using in my definition of morality, that type of ought that does not have only descriptive characteristics, like, in Hume's is ought distinction.
And we reject that ought, so it convinces us why we're wrong.
Oh, to explain why moral wrongness in the sense that I defined it exists?
No. Ought, just on the ought. Just tell us why we're wrong about being the ought.
So you believe that sort of ought that I'm using my definition of morality does not exist. Is that correct? And you want me to explain?
It is nonsensical in my view, yes.
Okay. Well, I don't know if there is a way I can convince you that this type of moral wrongness exists. But I think it is important.
Forget moral wrongness. I'm talking about the ought.
Well, no, I'm baffled when somebody says, I don't know if there's any way to convince you. Well, you became convinced. So what convinced you? Why isn't your reason good enough for us?
Oh, that's a good question. So when I was growing up, what convinced me is people kind of use this type of ought into their kind of moral semantics. And I just reflected on my moral experiences. Yeah, it does seem like, torturing infants just for fun is something that people ought not do in that type of ought. I'm relying on my experience for that. Now, maybe not everybody has that type of experience. It's like trying to explain the color blue to a colorblind person. Can I convince them that this color exists beyond just me telling them? Well, perhaps I can't.
Is torturing babies for fun as arbitrary as blue?
Well, I didn't say it was arbitrary. You just asked me, how did I know that this type of ought exists? And I said, my experience.
Because you're just, I think you think this ought is true because you failed to think it through very far. Because the ought you seem to be describing is you would be able to think it through. Why is torturing a baby for fun wrong? And you'd be able to think through, well, the ramifications are because it would harm someone. Not because of an end termination of evaluating what would happen if this action came to be, right? It's not a divine fiat necessary.
I didn't say it was.
Flash forward. Well, that seems to be what you're advocating. Am I wrong?
No, that's not what I was advocating here. I said my original claim that this type of moral knowledge, this knowledge of moral wrongness, is evidence for theism, but I didn't advocate divine command theory. And we seem to be discussing on whether this type of moral wrong seems to exist.
You've missed my point there, or perhaps I expressed it in a way that led you to think I was talking about divine command theory, which I absolutely was not. You seem to think that there is an ought that can be absent a goal, right? So you gave the example of if I want to do well in school, which is a goal, then you ought to study. You are advocating that there is another use of the word ought that is divorced from goals. Are you not?
Reason giving independently of one's goals, yes. That's sometimes referred to as the categoricity of morality.
Matt, did that make sense to you?
I'm playing chess.
Okay, fair enough. So you to explain to me as best you can how that there can be an ought divorced from goals.
It's that type of ought that does not have only descriptive qualities. It's that type of ought that would be that way.
Give me an example that isn't morality related.
I don't know if there is a type of ought that is not morally related. That is not morality related in that way.
Okay, so if there's no examples that aren't morality related, then you are basically talking about your intuition about a very special case. I'm presenting a moral system that entirely is goal based and comes to the same and comes to the same answer on some things as your moral intuition.
Well, I don't think that's true because your definition is different from mine. So it seems to be talking past each other.
You are trying to demonstrate that I think that you're trying to demonstrate that my version of ought that always requires goals is deficient in some way. I am asking, what is the deficiency? What is the gap that there's something out there that I am not explaining somehow, that your version of morality is better at explaining than mine?
Well, the deficiency would be that the type of morality you're talking about is not the type of morality that people normally use when they say something is morally wrong. You'd just be talking about something else.
That it absolutely is. They just haven't thought it through a lot of times. And when they have thought it through, I've yet to come across anyone who has thought it through that thinks that morality is divorced from harm and flourishing.
Well, I think we need to be careful here because I'm saying that the type of ought that does not have only descriptive qualities. So it can have some descriptive qualities. So, for example, it might also accomplish some goal. But I'm saying that the moral ought does not have
describe to me this gap.
Qualities.
Give me the examples of the things where I am deficient. What is this? You seem to be saying, Paul, you're correct, plus some other thing that you've yet to describe.
Yeah, it's that type of ought that does not have only descriptive characteristics. That would be the difference because this is the type of ought I'm using.
For example,
like when someone's saying you shouldn't torture infants just for fun. It's that type of ought.
And you can fully justify that in what I just said. You fully can ground that in in a goal of reducing suffering. So it's not deficient. Try again.
But that grounding wouldn't be using the type of ought that morality is using. It would be justifying a different claim. That's the deficiency.
You are not communicating clearly to me in anything. I'm yet to see here what is deficient in my thing. You're just saying I categorize it differently, and saying you do it differently doesn't help me understand where my deficiency lies.
Okay, so explain to me your type of ought for morality is a type of hypothetical imperative, right? Where if you want to do X, you ought to do Y. Just means as a matter of practice, it need to do X to accomplish Y.
I think that the word ought is. I think the word ought is entirely meaningless without a goal. Without the way I'm describing it, ought has no difference. Go ahead, Matt.
I think the only difference is that Paul and I would generally say, "Hey, here's a goal, and that's how you decide what you ought to do." And it seems that Maverick is saying, absent a goal, there's some non-descriptive way to get to prescription.
Well, so largely it boils down to the deficiency, if we can call it that, is that seems like we might be using two different definitions of morality. So when I say morality exists, and you say morality exists, we're talking about two different things. Now, the type of ought, again, I'm using the type of ought does not have...
I don't even think morality exists. Morality is the label that we put on our assessments of the consequences of actions with respect to a goal.
Okay, and if you define morality that way, that'd be different from the definition of morality that most people ordinarily use.
I don't care what most people would nearly use. Most people don't understand these subjects at all.
Well, I think it's important to understand what most people mean because when theists like myself...
No, it's not, because most people are going to go run with their intuitions and their flawed understanding and think that and reach conclusions that aren't warranted. And then when they get flustered, they're going to say, well, you know what? My answer would be, I don't know, but that's uncomfortable. So I'll go ahead and presuppose a God as an answer.
Well, I think the reason why it's important in discussions like this is that when theists like myself say that moral knowledge or morality's existence is evidence for theism, they're talking about this type of morality. And so when you say,
And
I
we're
believe
saying
that,
and we're saying we don't accept that type of morality. Can you demonstrate why we should? And you failed to do that repeatedly. It's not a problem with our view. It's a problem with you and your ability to demonstrate that your view is superior.
may I finish?
Ask that one more time and let's see whether or not you get to finish. What was this? May I finish? I'm pointing out a problem. What is there to finish?
Oh, you interrupted me. I was asking. All right. Never mind
welcome
that.
to my show. I'm pretty much sure I get to interrupt whenever the fuck I want.
Yes, I suppose that's true.
Cool.
When I think the reason why it's important is because when atheists and theists talk about whether moral wrongness or morality is evidence for theism, atheists and theists can sometimes talk past each other. And so I think it's good that we understand where we come from. When theists
are we talking past each other when you tell us what you believe and we say we reject that? Is that us talking past each other?
No, I mean beginning when you said we believe in moral
wrongness. Are we
wrongness.
talking past each other?
I hope not.
Cool. So why are you bringing up what you've heard in other conversations with atheists and theists? Why can't you just be present in the moment and make a demonstration that your view is superior?
All right. Well, I'll ignore that then and say, okay, the reason why I think my view is superior is because I think my view on theism, moral wrongness fits into that, and I think moral wrongness exists. Now, you asked, what can I do to demonstrate that type of moral wrongness exists?
Yes.
And I suppose I could point to examples and hope for the best, but it seems that you dismiss those examples. Where, for example,
I'm
I think
waiting for an example of why
your example is. Well, one example is I think it's morally wrong to torture an infant just for fun using that type of bot.
But I don't believe it for the same reason you do. And so
but you just said you didn't believe that type of morality.
The mere fact that we both have the same opinion doesn't mean that we have the same foundation for it. And it doesn't mean that your foundation is correct.
It seems like we're talking past each other again, because I said, I think it's morally wrong to torture an infant just for fun, and you agreed, but you don't believe in the type of moral wrongness I believe in, right?
Sorry, we believe that it's immoral under our definition of moral, right? When you grant
I'm not done nitpicking over the words. I'm in agreement that by my view of morality, it is in fact wrong to torture an infant for fun. And by your view of morality, it's wrong to torture an infant for fun. Now, under your view of morality, is it immoral for a man to lie with another man as he lies with a woman?
Oh, I think that's getting off topic. I don't want to discuss that.
That's a question for you. Under your model, is that immoral?
You mean on my moral semantics?
In your view of moral knowledge, is it morally wrong for a man to have sex with another man?
My definition of morality doesn't deal with that question. I think we're getting off topic.
Your definition of morality doesn't include issues of potential sexual immorality?
Well, moral semantics is just about how we define moral terms. That's a different issue.
I'm talking about why can you give a specific example that it's wrong to torture a child for fun, but you can't answer the question about whether it's wrong for a man to sleep with another man as he sleeps with a woman?
Again, this is getting off topic here.
Are you going to answer the question, or am I going to drop you like a hot, dishonest rock because you want to pick something in order to make a point about morality? You want an example, which we've already agreed with. And then when we point out, stop fucking talking. Stop talking until I'm done. Then when we point out we agree on that, you want to say, well, I mean something different by moral knowledge than you do. Yes, we already knew that from the beginning. So now we need to ask questions to figure out where our moral system differs from yours and why. And so I asked a really straightforward question. In your view, does your moral knowledge include the knowledge that it is immoral for a man to have sexual intercourse with another man? Yes or no?
Again, that's off topic, and I don't want to get distracted here.
All right, goodbye. If you're not going to fucking actually play the game and defend things honestly, there's no reason for us to talk to you. But I think what you've done is your refusal to answer this question is going to speak volumes.
Again, that's off topic, whether the existence of moral knowledge. We don't agree that moral knowledge exists on this sense of my morality.
Look, if I put up a list of 10 moral questions right now, to get your moral assessment on them, would you respond to any of them?
No, because that's off topic.
Then why
from what
did
I'm
you pick
discussing
the
about.
one about torturing children? Why are you okay with declaring that it's immoral to torture children for fun, but you won't answer the other questions?
Because giving an example that it's morally wrong to torture an infant just for fun is a clear example of something that is morally wrong in a sense that I am saying. Now, if you don't agree that that type of moral wrongness exists, then that would be a point of disagreement, and there would be nothing I could do to convince you that that type of moral wrongness exists.
I'm asking you what other moral positions your model supports, because that's how I'm going to evaluate a moral system, by the conclusions that are reached on behalf of it. I don't know why. I don't know why you're refusing. Is it immoral for me to stick a sword through a random person on the street for my own amusement?
Well, I don't think this is, but my moral semantics by itself doesn't say whether it is. Moral semantics is just about how we define moral terms. Like, what do we mean by moral and wrong?
I'm not talking about the moral semantics.
Moral.
I'm talking about the conclusions of your, what you call moral knowledge. Is it part of your moral knowledge that me walking down the street, sliding a sword into random passersby for amusement, does your moral knowledge say that that's wrong?
Well, I think it is morally wrong, yes.
Okay. Is it morally wrong for me to stick my penis instead of a sword into people?
Again, we're getting off topic here.
No, we're not. Like we're completely on topic, but every time you avoid it, I just get happier and happier at exposing the absolute bullshit that you're spewing, because you're choosing what not to answer.
Yes, I am.
If we're going to evaluate a moral system, then the conclusions that you reach based on that moral system, compared to the conclusions that Paul and I reach independently, we don't agree on everything, based on our moral systems. But when we sort out, here's the three of us, here's what our positions are, and which system we use to get to those positions, is that not a good way of evaluating a moral system?
No, there's a difference between meta-ethics and applied ethics. You're talking about applied ethics. I'm talking about whether we know that moral wrongness exists. And it doesn't seem like you believe that moral wrongness exists.
I don't know how many fucking times we can tell you over and over and over and over and over again that what you're describing we don't believe. We moved past that 15 fucking minutes. Shut up. We moved past that 15 fucking minutes ago, and we're trying to evaluate moral systems. Why are you opposed to that?
Because that's not what topic or question under at hand. I said that moral knowledge is evidence for theism.
Say goodbye, Maverick.
Goodbye.
If you're going to call in because you want to demonstrate that moral knowledge proves there's a God, but Paul and I don't agree that the thing you're describing as moral knowledge is real, then we're stuck. You might as well have called in to say, hey, I think purple unicorns that shit yogurt prove God exists. And if we say we don't believe purple unicorns that shit yogurt exist, and you're like, well, I guess we're at an impasse, then the next thing we do is go on to the foundations in the epistemology there of, okay, if the unicorn is what's telling you what's right and wrong, let's evaluate some of the things that the unicorn told you. Does the unicorn think it's wrong for me to wear a skirt that's a little too high? Does the unicorn think it's wrong for me to wear a skirt? Does the unicorn think it's wrong for me to have sex with a man? Does the unicorn think it's wrong for me to like candy corn? Let's sort out. And you can say, no, the unicorn doesn't care if you like candy corn, and it doesn't care about your sex life. The unicorn can have all these things. And then we can say, you know what? I kind of like that unicorn system. It seems to be consistently providing results that are in strong, consistent, that are consistent with the values and the goals that we're trying to do. And then we're right back to the goal. The difference is that Maverick's goal is to do what he thinks God wants and declare that to be the objective moral foundation. I'm so sick of my camera freezing on weird pictures of me. It's hilarious. But yeah. Sam's calling from North Carolina. Sam, they, them is deconstructing, and let's see if we can offer any kind of useful help at all.
Hey there, guys.
Hey, Sam, how are you?
Hey, Sam.
I'm all right. Just for, I guess, a little quick background. I was raised in a cult until I was about 13. Really fundamentalist, very, exorcisms on Tuesdays, guys, type of place.
Oh, wow.
My family
I'm sorry.
is, yeah, it was, well, it is what it is. I was a Christian until I was probably early 30s. I started deconstructing and kind of backing off within the last 5-6 years. But the last 2 years, I've really been pulling away from the faith and kind of becoming more agnostic, I guess. There could be something I don't know type of feeling about it. My folks are still really religious, though. And our family is very close, but a lot of that in the past has come from common religion and going to church together and all that crap. So they have a very set expectation, I guess you could say, for the type of person that they want me to be, which is not working out very well for them at the moment. Unfortunately, I can't really come out and say that I don't believe anymore because I believe that would cause a rift in the family. My parents would both be terrified because they're both still very religious and, hell is very real and, what if you lose your faith, et cetera, et cetera. They have noticed me backing off and being more vocal about my disapproval and how the church handles things, such as the LGBTQ community and abortion and all the pedophilia and sexual abuse shit that's been going on lately. And I think they're realizing that I'm backing off, but I can't fully say it, and my dad will kind of grill me sometimes. It's kind of like you have to maintain these standards in a way. He one time came over out of nowhere and brought up issues of faith and how's your walk with Christ and all this other stuff. And I told him as best I could, basically, my faith, quote unquote, is different now. Which is not entirely a lie because being gone is different than it was. But, or I told him, I don't believe that being LGBTQ is a sin. I don't believe a lot of the things that I was taught growing up. Or shit that I learned when I went to a theological school. Sorry.
Just a quick question, Sam, just so I can help place this in perspective. Are you still financially dependent on your parents?
Yes and no. Right now I do live on my own, but because of my job and my living situation, I have had to ask them for help a couple times just because we went on strike recently. Yeah.
It just helps inform the kind of replies I might give. I would give different advice to someone who's currently financially dependent than not. So please carry on.
Sure. It's not full dependence. They help me out kind of with groceries sometimes, things like that. Mm-hmm. And I know that they both love me. I know that they're coming at this from the point of we don't want you to lose your faith. My mom has literally cried on the phone about that. And I talking about I haven't told them that I'm non-binary or bisexual or anything like that, because I think that would make their brains implode. And as much as we disagree, I do like having them around. But when I did talk about, I don't believe that being LGBT is wrong, or that I've been listening to, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Dan McClellan. Yes. I listened to some of his stuff on YouTube because it kind of helps me look at the Bible more from a historical and cultural basis, and those things that have like influenced it rather than this, mystical, unquestionable book that could like ruin your life if you don't follow the rules type of thing. It kind of helps me take the fear out of what I've been taught for so long. But whenever I mention things like that, my dad will be like, oh, so the Bible isn't the final authority, and you're saying truth is relative, and so you believe what you believe, and I believe what I believe, and nothing is actually true, stuff like that. And I don't really know how to come back at that argument, if that makes sense.
You've seen this in a couple forms already today. So we
Yeah.
talked about belief and knowledge, and absolute certainty keeps coming up, and whether or not there's whether or not moral truths as oughts exist as a capital T truth, kind of somewhere out there to be discovered, or and that's, we don't ascribe to that. But if your family's coming out, you're going, oh, well, then the Bible's not the ultimate authority. I mean, when somebody asks me, is the Bible the ultimate authority? My answer is, of course not. That's silly. But that's not the answer that I would have given all the time to everyone, including, when I was finding my way out. But I think one response, okay, I apologize in advance. I'm going to feel gross. And this will provide you cover, which is, the Bible isn't the ultimate authority. The Bible is a book. If there is in fact a God, then God is the ultimate authority. And the Bible can be wrong about things. And if you, my parents, believe that you can have a personal relationship with God and that God will communicate with you, then you are already in a position of communication that is superior to the Bible. Now, I don't know how well that'll work or how useful it's actually going to be in the long term, but no, even as a Christian, the Bible was not the ultimate authority. Jesus was the ultimate authority.
Right.
That's kind of the whole Protestant revolution or Reformation in a nutshell. Is no, it's not up to the Bible or this particular church. It's between me and God. And you can actually do that and still be honest. I mean, you're working through stuff, you're figuring stuff out, and it can very simply be, my relationship with God is between me and God.
I try to say that sometimes, but again, I love them. They're not like abusive narcissists or something, but they have involved themselves and continue to involve themselves in matters of faith in my life since I was a kid, to the point where it's really hard. It's been very difficult to find myself, I guess, pulling away from this, because the more that I pull away from Christianity, the more I feel like I'm finding who I could have been all along. And it's really, I'm really trying not to become a very angry, like, atheist, I guess. Not that all atheists are angry. That's not what I mean. I just, me personally, being very angry and atheistic and anxious. I feel like they have every right to be, honestly, especially if everybody dealt with this crap. But I don't know how to pull away from it when, like, it feels like they keep trying to drag me back in. And I don't want to damage our relationship, because I know they love me and I do love them. If we had an antagonistic relationship, it might be easier, because there's that disconnect. But because there's not, and also because they don't, in a lot of ways, respect me as an adult. It feels like it's really difficult to pull myself away from it and not feel like they're challenging every, pardon my language, goddamn thing that I say, or that I have to defend everything that I say and be on my toes, ready for this question, that question. And if I tell them, like, well, I've been listening to people like Dan McClellan and talking about history and culture and things that influence the Bible, like, oh, so you're saying people that, just study it for what it is and take life applications from it are stupid. No, I didn't say that. But there's no good faith argument, if that makes sense. If I pull away or if I tell them I'm seeing something different or this is the path that I'm choosing, it's like it's an insult to them. And I don't know how.
You can't.
Sorry, I really didn't mean to get emotional.
There's no way.
That's quite all right.
There's no way you can fix how personally they're going to take all of this. My parents and I have pretty much stopped talking about religion and anything even close to it, because we had our arguments and we decided we valued the relationship more than trying to change the other person's mind. But also, they know I'm not going to take any crap and I'm not going to hide who I am. And so, if they're like, hey, what are you doing next weekend? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go speak at a convention. I leave it at that and don't dig in further. But they're going to be upset until they're dead. And sometimes I think a chunk of this may be just ripping the bandage off so that you can get past all the subterfuge and hiding stuff and just be like, this is me. And we're either going to get along with me as me, or you're going to show me that you don't care for me. You only care for a version of me that is willing to pretend to be what you're looking for. I'm going to bet, I hope I'm wrong, but I'd bet right now, Sam, they don't use your preferred pronouns.
They don't know. I can't tell them that I'm non-binary or anything.
If you were to tell them, there's no way they're going to use they, them pronouns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
You are in a situation where there's about 23,000 little things all stacked up, and they're all related to who you are and nothing to do with how other people should choose to try to value you. Whether or not you are cis, trans, non-binary, none of that is anything where anybody should make any sort of assessment about your value or quality as a human. Similarly, if you're not convinced there's a God, nobody should be making that as an assessment of other aspects of your character. And yet, the reality is you're the one in the relationship whose views have changed. And what you're going to have to do is kind of own that part of it for a little while. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to let people push you around, even if they're family members. I don't care if I'm related to somebody by blood or not. They're going to treat me and my family with respect, and I'll do the same thing back. And if we can't get to a point where it's like every time I walk in the house, it's, oh, let me tell you all about Jesus and how Jesus is doing a powerful work here. And this, if we can't get past that, they know I'm just not going to come over. And I get it. I have fucking 10 buckets of privilege that Sam doesn't have, in the sense that, I'm on my own. I've been on my own since I was 18. I have a place to stay. I have, partner. I have people around that are friends with me and care about me, in a way where I don't have, this is going to sound weird, I don't have any need for my parents, apart from the occasional back and forth banter of we are related and we generally sometimes like each other or might want to talk about something on occasion. Outside of that, Like I made a decision one day that if I had to cut my parents completely out of my life, I would. And that's not a decision that everyone is in a position to make for a number of reasons. And it's not even it's not a decision that I can say I would recommend to people. The only time I recommend it is if you're convinced that anyone is, if they remain in your life as things are, is making your life worse, then you should put up a wall and stop having contact with them until that situation changes. Either they change or you change or the situation changes. So yeah, what I ended up doing may not be right for hardly anybody. And as it turns out, I didn't have to do it. Like I haven't cut my parents out of my life. I just made the decision that I would if it were the best option.
So Matt and I are not therapists at all by any stretch.
True.
But one thing that I definitely learned through the same process that similar to what you're going through is the phrase or the term boundaries and how boundaries apply to relationships. And that's completely separate from the whole atheist, any kind of question you might have in life. Relationship boundaries are a very important thing. So one thing I would very much encourage you to do is to seek people who are therapists, either a personal therapist or people with qualifications online through books or videos or whatever, and just explore what healthy relationships looks like with boundaries in place. Because it sounds like if you do, like Matt and I, we've chosen to continue to have relationships with our parents with certain boundaries in place, and the explicit notice that, at least in my case, and I think in Matt's, that these boundaries will be respected or the relationship will end. And the boundary is the cost of the relationship we value. And so that would be just something Matt and I aren't going to be able to express as well as a therapist can. So that boundaries is something it sounds like your relationship needs, to my untrained ear.
It's I do actually have a therapist that I talk to weekly. She's helped me out a lot. I guess putting boundaries in it, when it comes to family, is definitely part where I struggle. Because how I was raised, it was very much, oh, well, if you're not being completely open, if you're not being completely honest, then you're hiding something or you're lying about something. So
one thing I would recommend that you promise to your parents, and only because it worked for me, was I promised, and they had similar concerns about truth. I promised that I was never going to give up looking for what is true. And I told them that what true is for me, and that they agreed for them, is what conforms most to reality. And so I committed to them never to give up looking for what is most going to conform to reality. If God is correct, then God is part of reality, and they can be confident that I would eventually find that. And that is a promise that you probably can make as well. Look, Mom and Dad, I am going to. I'm sorry, I'm assuming it's Mom and Dad. Look, Mom and Dad, I promise that if God is real, I will never give up trying to figure that out. But all I can do is evaluate against what is real. And so since you, Mom and Dad, are confident that God is real, you should let me pursue this in full faith in their Holy Spirit or whatever, that is the conclusion you will also come to. But that God has no grandchildren, so you can't just inherit this knowledge, right? You need to come to it on your own. So that is a promise that I made that helped. I don't know if, and because of similar concerns about truth, I don't know if that's, when the time is right, maybe that's something you can do as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'll definitely write that one down. I guess just as a last question then, when it comes to things, and I realize you both said that you're not therapists, but like in your own lives, when you put those boundaries in place with your parents or with other theists in your life, trying to get them to respect like that you have thoughts and opinions and they don't always align with Christianity or whatever. I've noticed that whenever I try to do that, the boundary itself is seen as a moral failure of sorts, because it's like, well, you wouldn't have to do this if you were, quote unquote, on the right side of things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that something that you had to deal with? And if so, was there a way that you were able to approach it from the perspective of like it not being a moral failing, but also showing them that. It's like, I know it's not a moral failing, but trying to tell someone else that, especially when they're on the phone crying to you about how, oh my God, you're losing your faith, you know, kind of difficult, I guess.
So for me, one thing that I did was I basically said to my parents, okay, you believe that God has a plan and that everything happens according to God's plan. And you believe that, you know, you can pray and interact with God. So you should be praying for God to reveal himself to me, because you know me, and you know that if God reveals himself to me, I will no longer, you know, doubt his existence. Now, I could be in a position where I absolutely believe there is a God and not worship it, just like I could be in a position where I am absolutely under a king and still be wanting to stage a revolt. But the issue of someone thinking that you've given up your moral foundation is separate from whether or not they think you're actually immoral. And in my case, my parents are in a weird position where they're absolutely convinced that I work for Satan and I'm leading people to hell. And yet they know me and see what I do. And they would have to acknowledge that I am a fairly principled and moral person. I do things that they absolutely think are immoral, but I don't. And mostly they're okay with that kind of stuff. It's not so much, oh, Matt did something we consider immoral, because they've both done things that they consider immoral. Everybody's done so. This is the thing about Christianity is, oh, we're not perfect. We're just forgiven. You know, we still sin and do all that stuff. God just forgives us. It's not that we're better than you. It's just that God likes us better than you. And it is in that mindset pretty easy for them to say, oh, they know I'm not running around murdering people. And yet, wouldn't actively leading people to hell be worse than murdering them? I would think so. And yet somehow they have to reconcile in their mind that even though I'm not murdering people and am doing something worse in their view, which would be leading people to hell, that somehow this is still part of God's plan, because everything happens according to God's plan. And so maybe God is saving up to convert me at some later time. And I think in your case, you can try a number of different tactics, but the one thing is, if nothing else, it can always be, I'm going through a lot, pray for me. I can't talk about it right now, but pray for me. It is a way of kind of avoiding the issue, but avoiding the issue might be the best thing for you and some other people on occasion.
All right. Thank you both. I really appreciate your time and your patience while I got this out.
No worries. And
I
Sam,
really appreciate your advice.
definitely reach out to recoveringfromreligion.org and possibly the Psychotherapy Project. There are counselors and people out there that can help, and people who've been through this. My experience with my parents is going to be very, very, very different from yours. And each situation is going to be different. I hope you find a way to both be comfortable with who you are in the situation that you're in, without having to hide everything, or being a doormat, or being the constant keep my head down and try to avoid eye contact and problems. That it's overwhelming, and I can't imagine how much you're going through. But yeah, Recovering from Religion Psychotherapy Project, and reaching out to others. I mean, you TACIS on Thursdays. There's people who are also non-binary who are on that show. If you haven't called and talked to them, it might be a good opportunity to call to talk to someone whose lived experiences as a non-binary person, and the conflicts and problems that they go through might be more beneficial than anything the cishet white guys are going to say.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And you said it's on Thursdays?
Yep. Transatlantic Call-In Show is every Thursday at 2 p.m. Central. I don't have the new list of who's hosting this week.
It's Arden and Josie.
There we go. So yeah, you can call in and talk to the lovely and talented producer down at the end of the hall, who I happen to have a massive crush on, but don't tell her.
My lips are sealed.
Sam, thanks for calling, and
thank you,
cut
Sam.
yourself some slack. Make sure that you have a group of people somewhere, online, in person, whatever, who you can go and talk to when we're not on the air and when the stress gets overwhelming. If you want somebody to commiserate, find the person who can sit there and listen and comfort and be like, yeah, I told you they were crazy, or whatever it is you need to hear. And then when you're ready for some actual backup, make sure that you're building relations with folks. And I know it's hard. It's like hand wave it away as, oh, go make some friends. No, make specific types of friends to fill the type of space that you need and support you in a way that isn't just, it'll get better. Then platitudes can make you feel good in the short term, but they don't do much to fix an issue. And
they're very much AIDS. I do have one of my closest friends is atheist, actually, and they've really helped me through
awesome.
this. I think without them, and ironically, another friend who is Christian, both of them have actually kept me alive over the last couple years.
There you go.
So I have a lot of really good support in that regard.
Hold them close.
Big virtual hugs for you, Sam, and we're going to move on to some other callers, but reach back out and don't forget about TACIS, because I'm sure that they would have better advice than us on a number of things.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate your time and your advice and support. Thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
Thanks,
have an awesome Sunday. It's a really good time to remind people. We've got about 5 calls left. And for all of you who are on hold, just stay on hold. We'll take you. We'll run long and get to those calls. It's funny to me how often we hear about a version of Christian love that is the exact opposite of what some of them might portray. Even though I acknowledge, I don't think there's truly anything like unconditional love. I just don't buy that. I think even as a parent, there are things that might make you not love your child. But I don't have kids, so I can't say for sure. I can say there are things that make me hate other people's kids. That part is definitely true. But we keep hearing about, oh, we love you, we love you, we love you, and God loves you. And I will say that Christians often seem to be reflecting the very love that they think is like God, where it's about punishment and following the rules and order and a very narrow view of justice, and with incredible restrictions on what you can do, what you can say, who you can be. How far, mom and dad, how far can I push it before you actually you can still sit there and be like, well, we love you, but we're going to kick you out. We love you, but we're not tolerating any of this. We love you, but we don't want to interact with you anymore. Where's the line? Is it being gay? Is it being trans? Is the line being a Democrat, being a libertarian? Is the line, you can pick your thing, whether it's political, whether it's moral. If you're just, just for some people, just being okay with other people getting married who happen to be same-sex couple, just being okay with it is enough, to get you tarnished, guilt by association type thing. We have 5 good calls waiting to get in here, and I'm going to take this one, and then Paul can pick the one we do after this one next. But Michael in New York has what I think is an interesting take, which is that religion is still useful today. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
We're all right.
So religion is still useful today, not in the sense of like fundamentalists, obviously. So, like you were saying, like the caller with the last one, like they're taking that shit like way too literally, like with her, like before.
Sure.
Why is it obvious that fundamentalism is? Maybe you'll explain why it's obvious that fundamentalism is different flavor.
So obviously, the thinking is too rigid. So everything has to be attached to something else. Like there's no mix and matching anything. Like everything is the way it was taught. It can't change. And obviously, when they see someone change, like their daughter, it goes crazy. I'm going through the same thing like with my family, but kind of like the opposite way.
I'm wondering.
So my family was like, yeah.
Right. So let me try and kind of narrow us in on the topics that are going to be most useful for the show. When you say religion is still useful today, does that have anything to do with whether or not it's true? Because something can be false and useful.
So no, it has nothing to do with whether or not it's true.
Okay. In that case, Michael, I mean, I know you've been on hold for nearly an hour, so I want to make sure that you get to make your case. But I don't really care if religion is useful. I care whether or not it's true.
Okay. So I'm not making the case for people to adopt it. I'm making the case that it shouldn't be something we try to tear down.
Oh, okay. In that case, I'm absolutely in disagreement because I think we should tear down any belief that isn't true.
All right. Actually, I agree with that. But when I say tear down, I don't mean like tear it down like and try to like destroy it, because that's not gonna go well. People are gonna see aggression and then go against that. People like will confuse like something good that's aggressive with something that's bad, just because they see like aggression towards like something.
You're merely arguing tone and tactics?
Yeah, mostly in order to like,
what if you're just sitting here? What if you're just sitting here letting people call in, asking them to demonstrate the truth of their religion, and they keep failing? Is that pushing too hard?
Nah, I actually really like what this show does with that. But they keep. So is it better to have people keep coming back to try to figure it out on their own, or like maybe like try to push them towards like talking their own words in a little bit?
I'm not sure I followed the question.
So when like you reject the caller's claims, they're not hearing what you're saying. Obviously, like that's why they keep saying it over and over, and you're like, just answer the fucking question. They literally don't hear the question you're asking.
Yeah, but the issue here is that I'm not necessarily doing it for their benefit. I'm doing it for the people who are listening who agree with me.
Who was me?
Okay.
Who was listening to calls and became who was like just a few years ago, I thought dinosaurs were on Noah's Ark, and thanks to people like Matt, I was able to hear my most capable defenders, people who agreed with me, and I was able to hear people like Matt poke holes in them. And because I was listening, it wasn't quite as personal. And then I was actually able to internalize that and say, oh, shoot, that's like a good point. Because it wasn't my neck, I wasn't the one being embarrassed, right? So these are absolutely things that need to be. As someone who deconverted, I needed everything. I needed George Carlin mocking me, and I needed other people who were recently deconverted who are giving me a very soft sell, right? Like you can't. There's no one size fits all here. So if you're calling in to say that one tactic or another tactic is in your view shouldn't be used, I'm here to say, well, that's short-sighted.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, yeah, I like the idea of like using like a bunch of different ways, and I understand what you're saying.
And to your question, you said that religion is useful. Is there something that religion does that we couldn't also accomplish without it?
No, nothing. But the problem, but with the last caller, there's people who are just like, they're just too set. And there's always going to be someone who like isn't set, who's going to become set because we have to share the same space.
I can assure you that I was more set than any caller I've ever received. So I refuse to accept the narrative that there are specific people that cannot be persuaded otherwise, because it's all because I just put myself as the example. I just cannot. I've yet to come across anyone who is as set as I was. So
I think there's an aspect to what you talked about with comedy, where I'm wondering for people who are former believers who are now not. I love comedy. Tons of it. But I don't remember the first time I laughed at a joke that mocked my religion, but I know there was a moment. I know there was a moment while I was still a believer and I heard a joke that mocked something I believed. And instead of being offended or troubled by it, I laughed. And then I went, I don't remember what the joke is. I'm sure it happened several different times, but it's like, oh, I shouldn't be laughing at that. But that gets in your head and it becomes, hang on, is what I'm saying, is what I believe truly ridiculous enough that we can joke about it, in some kind of cartoon demonstration? And I don't just mean like a trick question where you're like, oh, how many animals did Moses take on the ark? And then everybody laughs. Ha ha, that wasn't Moses, that was Noah. That's not a joke. I mean, and not the jokes that are consistent with religion. They're not the jokes that are consistent with religion, like, a Christian, a Jew, and an atheist wind up at the pearly gates and are standing in front of St. Peter and blah, 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 blah. Those jokes never resonated with me because I didn't buy into this notion that there was a St. Peter at the pearly gates. It's all like Catholic, doctrine and mythology and all that. But there comes a point where you're going to hear the first joke, whether it's Jimmy Carr or somebody else who doesn't hold back but kind of takes pot shots at a religion that are strong. And as a matter of fact, Jimmy Carr had a joke that was like, oh, when I was a kid, and I shouldn't do the accent, but when I was a kid, I had this invisible friend and he was constantly looking out for me. And, I would talk to him every night. And then I grew up and I gave up religion. And that's a sort of joke that when I heard it, granted, I was already an atheist by the time I got around to listening to Jimmy Carr, but when I heard jokes like that, it would be like, ooh, that's funny, but I shouldn't laugh like that. Because to laugh is to somewhere subconsciously acknowledge that you believe bullshit, or that what you believe is rightfully mocked by people who don't share those beliefs. And whether you want to write that off as, well, God has revealed himself to me in a way that I can be confident, and someday God will do that for those other people, and I have nothing but empathy and pity for them until such time as God brings them into the fold. You can do that. But at the end of the day, you still laughed at the joke.
Yeah.
Did you have any other thoughts, Michael, that we didn't get to?
Nah, that's all good. Yeah, there's a lot of other callers.
Sweet. Well, if you want to call in sometime to tell us why religion is true and not just useful, I'm happy to talk about that another time too. Although let's do it not next to the road where I can hear the cars driving by.
Nah, yeah, I got to be out the house. My house is like really loud.
I got you. Take care, Michael. Appreciate the call. All right. We have a couple other calls left and some theists. Maureen in Ontario, Canada. She's calling in to want to know why we think humans throughout time have had to have faith in a God.
Yeah, I guess I want to just say that I think what I think faith is this need or this want in this higher being. And is this something that humans have always had, and why have they had to have this? Like, what is it about us that needs this or wants this?
Yeah, and the other thing is, some of us don't want it and don't need it.
No, I understand that. But like,
I'm just acknowledging that it's.
Okay,
Maureen,
I'm sorry.
I'm just acknowledging that it's not
Yeah.
universal. As a matter of fact, there are also cultures like the Paraha, which is I think an Amazonian tribe, that they had no concept of God. And so we know that this isn't truly universal. But I think the best explanation is that human beings are flawed thinkers facing problems. And as long as we're flawed thinkers facing problems, that means we're not always going to get to the right answer, and we're willing to take an expedient, comforting answer. And I don't know what could be more comforting than, I know you don't know, and I know you're afraid of what you don't know, but there's someone who knows, and they're looking out for you. That's a comforting thought when faced with uncertainty, and it applies for death and sickness and every bit of trouble that comes in your life. I mean, how can you not just, oh, you know what? It's all part of God's plan. Or, you know, no matter how many of you are against me, God is still with me. And Christianity and other religions actually exploit that aspect of humanity. In the Bible, basically suggesting that you're going to be persecuted in my name's sake. And what that does is when somebody is trying to shove their religion down somebody else's throat and they start to feel persecuted, they get a backlash and they feel persecuted. It just reinforces the idea that they've done the right thing. If you think when you're out there doing what Jesus wants you to do, that people are going to call you names and people start calling you names, then you're like, I'm being persecuted because I'm doing the right thing by Jesus. But it could just be that you're an ass. Not you, Maureen.
Yeah.
But,
No, yeah, I get it. I guess I'm just saying, I understand that it's not this universal thing. It's just, why is our history so full of, there's so much of it. Like, there must be something that makes us all want, or most of us want to be this way. I don't know.
Well, Maureen,
Does that make any sense?
You know that humans have evolved such a way that a couple things are true. One is that we don't like being out of control and not knowing things, right? You would agree that that's just been a universal human trait. So one way to fill the I don't know or I'm out of control gap is to insert someone that does have control, even if they're for you or against you. Different religions have done it, but that there's something else that there is control, and there's someone else that does know. And it's that God did it has been a universal band-aid forever of a gap of we don't know, right? And we don't know is something that's uncomfortable for most people. So you acknowledge that. It sounds like you also acknowledge that it's been a human trait that we have evolved because we relate to faces, soul, and everything, that we anthropomorphize things, right? We give things humans traits that don't have human traits. You look at any animated movie, you know, we give the mice human motivations. We give the trees human motivations. So that trait that we've evolved also extends to obviously nature and everything else, right? So go, well, we have motivations, so therefore the wind must have motivation, or therefore we anthropomorphize things just in general when we are uncomfortable as well. So do you think that those two things in combination are anthropomorphization as well as our discomfort with I don't know? Do you think that is a solid enough answer for your question as to why people throughout the last 100,000 years may have posited gods?
Yeah, I guess I see what you mean. I guess I'm kind of thinking that it's because one of our traits is that we have to be part of something. Like we can't be on our own, and maybe we're influenced by the fact that so many around us think one way, so we end up thinking that way. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
That's a great observation. Absolutely, Maureen. But we as a social species, humans are not the fastest. We are not the strongest. We, by ourselves, any individual human is going to die quick. We have evolved so that the cohesiveness, so that the social aspect, they call us a social species, is our survival advantage, other than our intelligence. And so I think you hit on something exactly right there, that we feel good when we're part of the in-group, and we feel bad when we're not part of the in-group, which explains a lot of how religion is successful. And also, I think you're right that if you're alone on an island, you want to posit that I feel lonely, so I'm going to make a Wilson, but a Wilson in the sky. So I think that is probably also another factor. Given all that, Maureen, do you think that's a good enough answer for your question as to why this happened?
Yeah. I think it's just something in us that we just like have this need or this want of something that we can't, like you say, we can't prove it, so it doesn't really make sense.
Right.
But
do you agree that that's the desire is not a sign that there has to be something out there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Great.
Yeah. I see your point. Yes, really.
There's a question that kind of gets to the heart of what Maureen was talking about, which is you can look at the history of human beings and the number of times that they have advocated for, posited, asserted some God exists. And we can be pretty confident that some, most, or all of those claims aren't true, because it can't be the case that these competing gods all exist. You can't have two all-powerful gods that are the one true God. And so there's this question of why throughout history have we keep making these claims that we can't really demonstrate. But there's a better question, I think, and it may be about how I ended up where I'm at, which is, if there is in fact one true God, why isn't that the one that is clearly defended and presented instead of all the others? Why does that God not clear up the confusion? If I were God and I looked down at the world and saw people worshiping all kinds of things that aren't real and not worshiping me, well, first of all, I'd be okay with that because I don't want worship, but I wouldn't be okay with them worshiping all the other things. At a minimum, even if I was apathetic and wasn't looking for adoration myself, I think it would be my responsibility to say to the people that are down there, hey, I'm God, not that. I really need to clear that up. And the fact that nothing even remotely like that has ever happened is almost unsurprising if you're in the view that there's not a God out there, but it is seemingly unanswerable if in fact there is a God out there.
Yeah, I have this stupid thought maybe that if like I grew up Catholic, so I knew the Bible, I knew Adam and Eve. I always had the story that when they never accepted, his one rule, and he said, "Okay, you're off on your own." I kind of think we're all off on our own. So I kind of think he sort of gave up on us. Does that make any sense? I'm not sure.
Kind of, but I think part of the problem here is that what you've done is you have cherry-picked parts of the Bible while ignoring the other parts of the Bible, and you're doing it for seemingly good reasons, in that these other parts don't make sense. And what's the best way for me to make this make sense? Oh, I can say that after the Garden of Eden, God just left us on our own. So all the rest of that stuff in the Bible is just made up, but the first part's true. Except that we know that the first part of the Bible cannot be literally true. It literally gets the order of events wrong, And we know that even, I hate the phrase, but mitochondrial Eve, which is our nearest universal female ancestor, and mitochondrial Adam, which is our nearest universal male ancestor, don't overlap in the time frames that they existed. Now there was never a literal Adam and Eve, but even the metaphorical one don't line up in time. And so we know that the stuff in Genesis isn't right. And what you're doing, and I'm just pointing it out, is let me see if I can salvage something in the story. And so the best solution you've come up with is something kind of like that might have happened, and then God gave up on us. And that explains why God's not interacting with us now. But that also means everything about all those religions, untrue, everything about salvation is untrue, and that the God we don't know anything about. We don't know if it wants respect or worship or adoration. We have to throw out Jesus. We have to throw out pretty much everything, which I'm fine doing, but it's just, I'm also willing to throw out Genesis chapter 1 and 2.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're coming from. Yeah. I'm trying to make an excuse or something for what I'm trying to believe in. I'm not really sure.
And you don't have to be. You don't have to be, Maureen. Just keep asking questions, keep being honest with yourself, keep caring about whether or not things are true, and you'll believe what your conscience dictates. You don't have a choice. Belief isn't a choice. You're either convinced of something or you're not. And if you keep striving for the truth and for understanding, I think you're more likely to find the truth and to find understanding than if you stopped and just accepted stuff. So keep asking questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much,
can
Maureen.
I just say one thing?
Sure.
Can I say one thing to you guys?
Okay, please.
It's kind of a joke. Where do you guys get the patience of Job to deal with some of these people that just constantly don't want to hear what you're saying to them? Like, you guys have patience. And my joke was that it must have came from somewhere other than because most people I know don't have this patience.
I genuinely appreciate that, Maureen, because it's very easy to find clips, especially of me more so than anybody else on the network. It's really easy to find clips of me losing my shit and having no patience. And I do appreciate it when people recognize that, hey, Matt does have more patience than maybe we thought. And so, yeah, there's no answer to that. I care about the truth. I used to believe something that I no longer believe is true. If I'm wrong, I want to know, but I ain't taking no bullshit. If somebody's going to come in and be like, oh, well, we presuppose God. No, we don't. I mean, presupposition is a non-starter. If you're not going to present evidence-based reasons to believe that there's a God, we can't get anywhere. And that appears to be to some as impatient or close-minded. And what it really is 20 years of doing this and having one person after another just try to claim, well, it's just common sense that there's a God. And that's biology isn't determined by common sense, and cosmology isn't determined by common sense. Common sense, while it's a useful tool that can be trained, is wrong about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
For me, Maureen, I still feel like I'm very fresh out of it. So for me, it's very easy for me. My whole channel is dedicated to me making videos to the me that I used to be, using the kind of tone and terms that the former me might have potentially listened to. So being fresh out of it, even though it's getting closer to a decade than zero. For me, that's it. Also Canadian. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thanks for listening.
Thanks,
I
Maureen.
appreciate it, and keep it up.
Thanks.
We will.
And before we have
calls,
I just want to say, before we get a weird caller who calling in 2 months from now saying that Matt said mitochondrial Adam when he meant chromosomal Adam, Matt knows. He knows. Matt knows.
Sorry.
So don't call in on that. He knows.
They're still going to email and call in because and genuinely, that was me. So there's the term among wrestling fans of being half smart, and it doesn't quite align with it, but that was definitely an example of me barely being half smart. Mitochondrial atom. Sorry.
He knows.
Live TV. What are you going to do?
Yep.
You're going to be wrong on occasion, and I am. And thank you for the correction.
Yep.
John in Texas is a deconstructing theist with questions for us. So, John, how are you, and how can we help?
I'm good, Matt. I'm good, Paul. How are you guys?
We're all right.
We're living the life.
Hey, living the life. Hey, Paul, I think this question is probably more for you since you have kids. And
okay.
I have to second what the last caller said. You guys do have a lot of patience. Matt, I just recently listened to you and Jordan Peterson, and I couldn't get through it, man. When he started talking about Dostoevsky, I was like, man, just answer the question, dude. Anyhow, hey, Paul, I have a daughter. She's being raised Catholic, which I think is fine, and she sends me videos, and the most recent one was of, you guys know, I think, Matt, you've dealt with Cliff, what's his last name, Knechtle or something like that?
Cliff Knechtle, and his son.
Yeah, so he's coming to Texas to a local church, and so she's saying me, she sends me videos and I send her information. I'm glad she's at least communicating with me. She knows she's an atheist. I'm having a difficulty, like wanting her to go to this thing, and I know that you maybe you are hands off with your kids' religion, Paul. I don't know, but I'm feeling more and more like I want to just steer her in the right way, whereas before I was. Hey, you'll figure out the truth by yourself, and I'll answer any questions that you have, but like I'm scared for her. I really
I'll give
am.
you
like yeah.
I'll just give you my strategy, and you can take it for what it's worth. I had 3 kids, and I've actually recently been going through a lot of old photos, and I discovered the time when I took my kids to see Matt Dillahunty perform magic. I doubt if Matt remembers that, but they were theists. I was not, but my son had a very high. He wanted to be a magician. He actually does close up magic, that kind of thing. So that was actually an opportunity where it was like literally, okay, I know your mom's going to hate this, but let's go see a magician. Sometimes opportunities like that present themselves, but more strongly was I felt like because I value my relationship with my kids more than any relationship on this planet, I knew that those religious talks drove a wedge. So I didn't ever push them on theology or science or any of those kind of things. What I would do was I would try to find epistemological teaching opportunities. So, for example, if an ad came on that made claims, or if a politician came on that made claims, or a YouTuber, or TikToker, whatever, what I attempted to teach always was, well, can we figure out whether this is true or not? And let's do that together as a dad-kid activity. And we would research and we would try and figure out whether or not something was true, but keep it outside of that hotbed of religion. Now, what I have seen, fast forward, 5 to 10 years, depending, they have taken those lessons on board with different results, obviously, in their lives. But whether your daughter's going to stay Catholic or not, and Catholic often as an adult doesn't mean very much. So, you may not get too stressed about that. But maybe it does. It does. The spectrum is wide. At this age, right. Teaching the epistemology, teaching how would you discover whether something is right, is almost the more important lesson than to try to come to correct conclusions when someone's a teenager, right? Because we all have something that we thought as a teenager or in our 20s that we now come to realize, well, that was wrong. That was stupid. But what I'm frustrated with my own life is that I didn't have the tools to figure out that dinosaurs weren't on Noah's Ark. So I made sure that my kids had the tools so that if they ever want to think about that question, that they will be equipped to do it. And I don't know if that's helpful,
right?
But it is the strategy I took.
I think you're absolutely right. Like, the fact that she's Catholic really doesn't bother me that much for that. I think for that reason. I don't think there's a lot of Bible study in Catholicism, at least the Catholicism that she's involved in. But she has this new boyfriend that is going to a church that you might have heard on the news. Like, recently, this church, the main founder had to resign because he had inappropriate relationships with a 12-year-old
Right.
when
And
he was in his
let's
20s.
not pretend that doesn't apply to Catholics as well. Obviously, they famously are problematic that way. So I shouldn't have. For everyone who has Catholic trauma, I certainly did not intend to say that church doesn't have problems. It's that their doctrine isn't always as problematic. Carry on.
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying. Like, like, the whole thing kind of worries me that she's, that this kid is claiming that she's not Christian because she's Catholic. Like, the things that he's being taught, and she's like, whoa, Christian. Do I have it wrong? I know, it's crazy.
Some Catholics will say they're not Christian. It's just like,
really?
It is the same sort of wordplay where somebody's like, oh, I don't have a religion. I have a personal relationship with Jesus, blah, blah, blah. And so there are some Catholics that think that they are the one true church and that Christian is a label that doesn't apply to them because and now this isn't all Catholics or anything. I'm just saying this is the sort of apologetics we've gotten over the years from like, I remember pointing out, hey, there's lots of different types of Christianity, Protestants, Catholics, Catholicism, et cetera. And somebody's like, oh, Catholic, so the Protestants would say Catholics aren't true Christians. And then the Catholics are like, yeah, we're not Christian, not in that sense. And it's really weird.
Yeah, it's strange. But hey, I appreciate the information, Paul. And hey, kudos on the caricature you did of me. Well done. And Matt, keep on doing what you're doing. Love to listen to you guys, and appreciate the videos. Y'all take care.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
we
John.
Appreciate you too, John. We have concluded the call-in portion of the show, which is actually the only portion of the show. We've shut down the calls and everything else. This is about to be the end of the regular Sunday show. There is another Sunday show after dark. Who's on tonight?
Forrest and Eve.
Forrest and Eve. Why did they even bother letting me and Paul do a show? If Forrest and
You're
Eve
right.
can do a show later.
We're clearly warm-up act. Absolutely.
You need to tell me which show was this that you went to of mine, and you were still
in Calgary when you were doing your magic and skepticism tour.
But you were still a believer then?
No, I was not a believer. I was very recently out.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
No, that's right. I was very, but they still very much are/were. And that was the first time I felt comfortable taking them to something that I knew was going to be challenging potentially to their faith, but the magic was the great hook that you gave a great show, and it was meaningful. That was good.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I would look forward to doing more of that and going around and redoing a new version of Magic and Skepticism. It was basically my lifelong, I've been a magician my entire life. I love it. I was obsessed with it. There are things that I can't do now that I used to do. Then there's tricks I did in Calgary that I won't be doing on future shows. Did I do the web there, the rope thing?
You did.
Okay. Yeah. I have that in the garage. I like it, but I won't be doing that one again. But anyway, it's one of those things where it's always surprising when you find the various connections and how people got involved with stuff. That's why I want to make a quick point before we close this out. I know Arden's going to want to wrap it up, get some food, throw the credits in, and we don't do super chats on these shows. There are a number of programs here on this line, network. It'll be the Sunday show after dark tonight. Tomorrow is going to be Skeptalk. Tuesday is going to be Chewed Gum. Wednesday will be the Hang Up. Thursday will be the Transatlantic Call-In Show, and next Friday and Saturday there's going to be Cause I Want Is. Something is going on here every stinking night of the week, at least through the election. We tend to focus on the religious calls during the show, as we did today, and as they'll probably do this evening. Monday's Skeptalk is generally about general skepticism, and if you have some, I don't know, weird belief that's not necessarily religious, that'd be the time to talk about it. Tuesday's Chewed Gums about purity culture and sex. So, you know, you want to learn some stuff about sex. You want to let's talk about sex, baby. That's Tuesday. Wednesday, I'll be back with the hang up. In the meantime, huge thank you to everybody who called in today, to our wonderful producer and call screener and all the moderators who are here. My apologies for the repeated constant freezing of my camera. It only does this in vMix. It doesn't do it when I'm in OBS streaming for Twitch. But I'm definitely going to I'm going to get with Jimmy. We're going to dig through potentially what's going on with my computer here. I might have to set up a GoFundMe for a whole new, no, I'm just kidding. But in any case, we appreciate everybody tuning in. We hope you have a good Sunday. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I just got moved directly.
Sorry,
off the
I messed
screen.
up.
You got bumped.
Wrong button. I was
think
trying to roll.
got played off.
I was trying to roll.
Why did you
credits.
just
The
fucking
music, yeah,
start
the
some music if
orchestra's
you're going to play me
going.
off like that? That's so.
Oh no.
Roll the credits. I'm done. I won't say anything else. I can't not say anything else. Thanks to all our Patreon producers. Patreon.com/calltheline. You can go to linemerch.com to find more ways to support the network. We'll see you guys shortly. Bye-bye.